Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hey, everybody. I'm glad I clicked on the right link. This is good.
So, hey, Steve,
Yes.
do you still have that link for the financial reports?
Yeah, I can find that.
Got them open here, but I can't seem again, get them to load.
Um,
I need to go for a remedial Zoom training.
Did anyone get a email from Jerry Hammond regarding some kind of out?
I don't think I did.
Yeah, it was talking about a build out project, financing it, and all this other stuff. So
I don't think I did. In fact, I should say I'm like 99% sure I didn't. That doesn't sound familiar to me.
yeah, he basically said, can we talk and whatever about the new projects and stuff, build out financing it and stuff like that. So.
Brian, if you want to forward it, you can. I don't know if he sent it to anyone else.
so, Mike, I have those documents. Do you want me to?
The same ones that we did the other day.
Yeah. So what part of it do you want?
Well, we could probably just show one or two of the charts when we
Okay.
review.
Okay.
I didn't realize it was 6:30. Is Daphne here?
I have not seen her yet.
Everybody else is here though, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure she's coming. We'll wait a minute or so.
I think I sent it to you. So,
Okay, I see it now, Brian.
all right.
Oh, there she. Is she? Daphne, are you here? I think I see your little icon.
I'm sure here.
Okay. So we're all here, right?
Yep.
Okay, everybody ready to get started? I'm hearing no protestation. So it is 6:32 p.m. This is the July 16th regular board meeting. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Campbell,
Here.
Ms. Chrysler,
Here.
Mr. Hairston,
Here.
Ms. Mooring,
Here.
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Here. And if you will all please stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, great.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks. Okay, is there a motion to approve minutes from the June 16th Finance and Facility Committee meeting, the June 18th regular Board of Education meeting, and the June 29th special board meeting?
I'll move.
Mr. Campbell, is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Mooring, any changes at all? Any corrections or additions to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll?
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring.
Yes.
Thank you. We're on the school community reports and presentations section of the agenda. Ms. Mooring, do you have an update from Finance Committee?
Sure. We met on Tuesday, July 14th via virtual meeting, and we had 7 items on the agenda. Obviously, first is the June financials and year-to-date financials, which actually were for the full year that closed on June 30th. And I commend superintendent and administration for coming in under budget on the expenses. That was is always good, and being luckily we were ahead on the revenue side because of TIF and CRA collections and and our levy generated additional funds. Secondly, we discussed an electronic vendor audit system that's on the board agenda to vote on tonight. That will add security and efficiency to the account payment process. And we also reviewed an agreement with Grady Enterprises, who is the consultant that our district uses for health insurance benefit management, and an agreement with K-12. They provide a robust financial platform for the 5-year forecast generation. Fifth was an agreement or an engagement letter with Kennedy Cottrell Richards, which is a accounting firm that creates our GAAP financials from our current cash system. And then we reviewed a City of Gahanna CRA project that has been proposed, and I think it's actually already been voted on, but because our district is being made whole through payments from the city, it's not something that we will be voting on. And then lastly was a review of the resolution to proceed with regard to the bond and operating levy and PI levy for the November ballot. And that again, we will be voting on this evening. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, do you have an update from Policy and Governance Committee?
We have our next quarterly meeting on Thursday, July 30th at 6:30 to 7:30, which will be followed by a special meeting from 7:30 to whenever. There's about a page of policies that will be shared with the board shortly. It looks pretty straightforward so far, but I'm always surprised at which one we get caught up on. So be there for surprises. It'll be a great time.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Ms. Chrysler, do you have an update from Student Learning and Achievement Committee?
I do. We had a very, very robust meeting in June, and we went through the mental health update, and we went through conscious discipline, and at each grade level, building level. And so it was a really, really thorough presentation, I felt, from each of those disciplines, and really showed how the connection between, you know, mental health and some of the things that we've been doing with the counselors and kind of the outreach into the schools has impacted then the conscious discipline and how that all kind of ties together. I think it was especially meaningful because, you know, we were asked as a board and had some decisions to make with respect to how we were going to spend dollars. And I think we heard loud and clear from the teachers in particular that they really needed mental health support in the schools. And this was even prior to the pandemic. So, you know, and I think that while there was requests for certain things across the district, I think that the board, at the recommendation of the administration, really listened to what the teachers wanted with respect to additional mental health support, and be able to support them in the classrooms and support the counselors in unique ways, and address some of the socio-emotional needs that kids are having now, and kind of just living in an environment with so much technology and so much coming at them all at one time. And so it was really nice to hear that comprehensive an update, because those were tough choices I felt like the administration had to make when they made that recommendation. And there were certainly sacrifices, and then some areas that were made where people are doing more with less. But I think that was a fantastic response to, you know, what we were hearing from the teachers and from the community. So I encourage anybody that is listening now, that if you didn't have a chance to attend that meeting, it is available to listen to. And I think if you are questioning or want to understand like what the school district's response was to that need and how those dollars were spent, it would be a fantastic venue to really understand that in full depth, and sit down and relax and make sure you get yourself like a glass of water, because it's a couple hours long.
Thank you, Ms. Chrysler. We are on the public participation section of the agenda, and I'm just going to apologize to my colleagues in advance, because there are a number of public participation statements that were submitted that I am going to read through. So you're going to have to listen to my voice for a little while. So I'll just apologize for that in advance. I'm going to make my way through the statements just in the order that I received them.
Girl, can you do them in different voices to add some?
I should bring my kids in, and we should rotate through reading them. I wish I had that talent. But
Just wondering. I just thought maybe we'd throw that out.
that would be fun. And it's not, I shouldn't say, there's not like a ton of public participation statements. It's just more than we typically receive. So I think there are actually, as I'll make my way through them, I think there are 4 statements that I'm going to read through. And then I think there are 2 people who filled out the public participation form that we reached back to. And as it turns out, they were filling out that form because they thought that they had to fill it out in order to watch tonight's meeting. So I do want to give some careful thought again to how we've worded the communication around public participation, because this isn't the first time we've had people feel like they were required to fill out the form just to be able to watch. So that's one thing. And then the last public participation statement that I have, I think I will read it, but I think ultimately it's one that was meant to go into the link that went with the frequently asked questions communication, because it's some specific questions about return to school. So I'm going to read it because it was submitted as public participation, but ultimately I think that's where it will need to go. But having said all of that buildup, I will read the first statement. And I think Mr. Verlingo, you were you were able to see the public participation, like the background of the form that gets filled out. So you have the names and the addresses. So I'll read the names of the people. I'm not going to read their personal contact information because I think we have it. So the first statement that I have is from Jane Messmer. Dear board members, I am the parent of a current student at Gahanna Lincoln High School and 3 proud alumni. After living overseas for several years, then in 2 excellent school districts, one near Cleveland and the other outside of Washington, D.C., we chose to return to Ohio 6 years ago and enroll our youngest in Gahanna schools. With all of the options available to us, we chose Gahanna so our son could graduate from a school district that we value and trust. I write now to express my concern for the safety of our kids and community and to urge the school board to follow the science and data and reopen our schools on a completely virtual basis for all students this fall. This is not an easy path, but it is the most prudent and safest. We are counting on you to lead our students and teachers down this path. Base Gahanna schools reopening on local data. The tough decisions on whether and how to reopen our schools must be based on infection levels in our own community. That's according to Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Franklin County infection numbers for the new coronavirus are the worst in the state right now, with more than 13,000 cases, 3,000 plus more cases than the next highest county. Today, we are at a very high risk for exposure and spread, but our numbers are on the rise, hurtling our county toward the highest rating, a level 4 for severe exposure and spread on the state's new public health advisory alert system. Based on our local data and infection rate, Gahanna Jefferson Public Schools should open in the only format we know to be safe right now, an all virtual model for all kids that protects our kids and our teachers. Kids are in danger from COVID-19. They catch it, they spread it, they suffer. Of the 13,456 Franklin County cases, 1,382 were young people ages 0 to 19. That's 10.3%. I don't need to tell you that 10% is a lot when you're talking about kids getting sick. We are not statisticians or actuaries looking at theoretical models. We are parents and principals, teachers and custodians, coaches and school board members. We love these kids. That's why we're here. 10% is a lot of infections. That's 2 or 3 kids in every classroom, maybe 18 kids in our marching band, and that's before they spread it even further. If we have kids or teachers in Gahanna catching COVID and dying, just one kid, just one language arts or math or Spanish teacher, because of our reopening decisions, it will change our school family forever. If we insist on opening before it's safe, if we put Friday night football and choir concerts ahead of the health of our kids and just one child or coach dies, our school family will never be the same. What is worse is that the number of Franklin County kids with COVID-19 is likely to be even higher than 10%. It seems that children are more likely to be asymptomatic than adults, so they are less likely to be tested. Chances are good that the infection rate of kids are higher than we know, and infections are likely to go undetected by families at home and by the school, meaning more spreading of the virus to other kids and adults and school staff and everybody's family members and on throughout our community. That's how pandemics work. Asymptomatic COVID-19 is not a free ticket for kids or those of us who take care of them at home or at school. Asymptomatic carriers still spread the disease. Not all kids are asymptomatic. Some asymptomatic people develop the classic symptoms, high temps, fatigue, and breathing difficulties later. Follow-up studies of asymptomatic carriers are uncovering lung damage, 57% of asymptomatic people in one study, including inflammation and lesions. Finally, some children with COVID-19 have developed the very serious pediatric multi-system inflammatory syndrome. So the idea that kids are not infected or affected by this virus is just plain wrong. The data shows they catch the virus at meaningful rates. The data shows that although many are asymptomatic, that is not true for all kids. The data shows they can develop symptoms later, and even if asymptomatic, can develop lung damage. And data shows that asymptomatic kids who parents and the school may never suspect are infected and who may never be tested or identified can spread the virus. Using an honor system or relying on parents and teachers eyeballing kids to determine if they are sick isn't science, and it's not a realistic or effective public health protocol. We, families in the school, are not up to the task of fighting this virus and keeping kids safe at school. In-person school will only make things worse. In one study, scientists found that going to school made children 3 times as likely to become infected. Knowing the science, knowing the data, the only safe school reopening is all virtual learning for all kids, continued until we get mass testing, meaningful containment of the spread of COVID-19, and widely available vaccinations. Our teachers and staff are not invincible nor expendable. Our teachers and staff are neither invincible nor expendable. The health risks for adults who contract COVID-19 are significant. The risk of death is real. We cannot ask them to come to school and endanger themselves and their families when we have a logical and safe alternative available, all virtual, all remote for all students and teachers. If we lose a teacher, bus driver, custodian, secretary, counselor, or a principal to COVID-19 because of our rush to return mid-pandemic, our school family will be changed forever. The only way to ensure we protect our kids, teachers, and staff, to ensure that they can all be together again one day in person to learn and grow, is to wait until it's safe and appropriate to open those doors. In the meantime, we need to reopen Gahanna schools in an all virtual, all remote format for all students. Alternatives for special education, social and emotional support, food programs. I acknowledge and appreciate that we have students and families with special concerns about remote learning. This can include special education students, students with IEPs and 504s, ESOL students, and students who rely on school food programs, students in special projects and trade-oriented classes, among others. We owe it to those members of our school family to work toward providing equitable and supportive solutions. I know this board, our principals, teachers, and staff have been doing this unseen work since the initial shutdown and have developed creative and caring solutions to fill some of these gaps, and may be worried about gaps they just couldn't fill last year with limited resources and time to plan. You are not alone here. Please reach out to the parents, business and nonprofit community and ask us to step up and help our neighbors and their kids. This is an unprecedented time and we are all in this together. We would love to welcome new families, read remotely to littles, mentor middle and high schoolers, collect project materials and manipulatives, donate clothing, do laundry, drop things off, deliver food, advise virtual clubs, talk to classes, share language skills. You tell us what we can do to help or help our special kids and our fellow parents, and we will do it. All virtual, all remote reopening for all kids. Based on local public health data and models which predict continuing spread of the virus in our community, existing and emerging science about health effects on youth and their role in spreading it to the community, and the lack of mass testing, vaccinations, or effective treatment for COVID-19, please commit to a virtual only, all remote school reopening for all students this fall, to be continued until we get mass testing, meaningful containment of the spread of COVID-19, and widely available vaccinations. According to the Centers for Disease Control, the lowest risk of contracting the new coronavirus for students and teachers is to engage in virtual only classes, activities, and events. Face-to-face, in-person, in-school plans can endanger teachers, students, and staff. The death of just one child or beloved teacher or staff member will hurt our school family forever. I thank you for your time today and every day. Respectfully, Jane Messmer. I should have said at the beginning, I have no way to time these ahead of time. And normally when people are speaking in person, I tend to be pretty generous in granting additional time as long as they're not repeating. So that may have been more than 3 minutes. I wasn't watching the clock, but I think that was the longest of the ones that I'm going to read. Okay, let me get to the other ones. Okay. So this next one is from Chris Hudson. And this is the one I'm going to read, but I believe it is meant to be put into the email box that went along with the frequently asked questions. Oh no, I take it back. This is not that one. This is a separate one entirely. I'm reading them in reverse chronological order. So this is the one I most recently received from Chris Hudson. The topic to be addressed is funding for police in Gahanna schools. Can you please provide me with information? Sorry, I'm working with my laptop. Can you please provide me with information on how much Gahanna School District currently pays for its police presence in its schools? Could you also provide a detail of how many individuals are employed, where they are employed, and descriptions of that employment? Thanks much. And somebody can follow up with Chris Hudson, but I guess I would also note that I think this is a topic that we'll be talking about at an upcoming board meeting. But if somebody's able to follow up with Chris Hudson and just provide the answers to those questions.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. The next comment is the one that I was talking about. This is from somebody named Julie DeBoard. And this is the one that I think is really a question that can go into that email box. Julie DeBoard says the topic to be addressed is distance learning. And it says, what will the third-party vendor distance learning option look like, pre-recorded or interactional? And that question can go to that email box, but I'll just, I guess, note for anyone who's out there watching, I think in our superintendent's report tonight, we will be talking about reopening plans. So perhaps the question will get addressed then. Mm-hmm. The next statement is from Jason Bennett. Topic to be addressed is school opening concerns. Dear GJPS, we have become increasingly concerned about the options being presented to parents for the upcoming school year. We feel backed into a corner and forced to make decisions for school that will impact the health of our families, our teachers, and our community. With so much uncertainty with the COVID-19 in Franklin County, it has become even more stressful and draining to know our decision is the only decision that we will make for the entire school year. Without a vaccine this year, it feels like our teachers and school staff are being thrown into a war zone, with parents expecting teachers to make sacrifices that put their own families in danger. While we understand we are given two options, we feel like we all know the safest option, distance learning, is being sidelined until the last minute, wasting valuable time and resources that could be used to enhance our already strained school year. A lot more data and clarity is needed before these decisions were made. We hope that GJPS will reconsider the limited options presented by allowing parents the opportunity to revisit their school decisions midway through the year. We also hope GJPS will reconsider opening its hybrid plan at a later date to ensure the safety of all of our students, staff, and communities. The next comment I have is one that is from a woman named Desta Borland, and it actually says topic to be addressed, none, topic comments, none. So that was one who signed up thinking that that was what was needed in order to watch the meeting. Okay, the next comment is from Laura Dranchak, and the topic to be addressed is returning to school. Good evening, my name is Laura Dranchak. I am a parent of 5 children ages 9 through 6 months. Our oldest is my stepdaughter and she attends High Point. The next is 5 years old and our house zones to Blacklick. In addition to being a parent, I am a scientist. I hold degrees in biochemistry, biotechnology, and neurobiochemistry. I was a science at AbbVie Pharmaceuticals in Massachusetts and have worked in the life science industry for the entirety of my career. My current position has me working with and supporting the large companies and institutions you have been hearing about in the news. Moderna, Pfizer, Regeneron, Genentech, Children's Hospital in Boston. Oh, sorry, new sentence. Children's Hospital in Boston, Dr. Fauci's lab, and many others at the NIH, NIAID, Johns Hopkins, etc. I work with companies and scientists working on COVID treatments and vaccines each day. Because of the oddly politicized nature of COVID, I feel compelled to also share that I am a registered Republican. Science, including viruses, does not respect party lines. I have lost people in my family to COVID. COVID is real. COVID is dangerous. People without pre-existing factors die from COVID. People that recover from COVID show signs of long-lasting impacts. Children can get COVID. Right now, 31% of children tested in Florida are COVID positive. There are long-lasting impacts for children. Multi-system inflammatory syndrome impacts children. COVID is a highly contagious respiratory virus that is spread by respiratory droplets adhering to mucous membranes. You can be asymptomatic and spread the virus. COVID has an incubation time of up to 14 days, and during that time, you can have no symptoms and spread the virus. People like to say that children are not as impacted by this virus. The science says we don't know. We took children out of their normal environments at the start of this pandemic. Schools are very similar to nursing homes and jail environments. I suspect we are going to see cases go up dramatically when schools open. The age range that is deeply impacted is the age range of parents and grandparents. I would argue that children's mental health will be severely impacted if they are worried about A, getting COVID, B, bringing it home to their family members, or B, bringing it home to their family members. You have more than just children in your schools. You have teachers and staff. People talk about returning back to normal. I 100% agree that in-person schools, as we generally know it, is best for kids and teachers, honestly. Opening for in-person school is going to be anything but normal. I would challenge schools to start innovating. Stop thinking about how do we get back to quote normal and focus on how do you educate the best given the circumstances. This is an amazing opportunity for innovation and improving education, including all the considerations of how to balance out resources and needs for all children. In my professional opinion, I feel strongly that schools should open with distance learning only. I support a delayed start to support training for teachers on distance learning. My suggestion would be to give the teachers 2 weeks of training. I would include a seminar on COVID and the science of how it is transmitted, and start with distance learning after Labor Day. Having a hybrid option makes it hard for people who want to choose distance learning to start as well. In speaking with employers around Ohio, if remote is the only option, in many cases, they have to account for that with their employees. If there is an in-person option, that gives them an out. If I am wrong, if cases don't increase, if the risk is very low with kids going back, what is the worst that happens? All our children do some distance learning for a few months while we assess risk. We give it time to see what happens. If the people pushing to open are wrong, what's the worst that happens? People die. Many ramifications of that from the family impacted all the way to liability. Erring on the side of caution with public health is not going to lead you astray. If you rush to hybrid learning immediately, you will have a hard time rolling it back. Look around the country. Slower is better. Additional points to be considered. Community trust is necessary for in-person schooling of any type. You need to trust those sending their children are following guidelines in their normal lives. From what I have seen, many are not, and that's hard. I sincerely hope everyone starts understanding the gravity of the situation soon for their sake and for our teachers and staff. Parents are blatantly ignoring guidelines and being very challenging to those who are following them. You have to trust all your teachers are taking this seriously. I understand that not everyone can balance out the distance learning. I 100% understand that this is just not possible for everyone. Those who want to make the choice can't, and they are dependent on the community trust part. My company's COVID travel and meeting guidelines would not support the hybrid model as accessible. I would not ask my employees to do it and would not be allowed to ask them. Why would I ask my children and teachers? You have a high risk person in your household and your children understand the risk. They could feel a burden of bringing the virus home because of being at school. What happens with kids who have seen their parents making fun of wearing masks or saying that COVID is not real? We worry about kids telling others about Santa. If we think they won't have social conversations that could be challenging about COVID, we are likely wrong. If you are into the consistency idea, what is more consistent? Knowing you are doing distance learning each day or having rotating in-person schedule that will be interrupted for mandatory quarantines and other disruptions. For children in co-parenting/divorce situations, this can be very hard. I have this situation. We have 2 high-risk children. If we don't agree on the schooling choice that comes with 1,000 questions, many could likely agree if we exercise caution at the start of the school year and ease into a hybrid model after learning more. I want to be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. Let's watch how it plays out and err on the side of caution. Make the plans for the kids that absolutely must have them. I will end with, this is challenging. You will have people upset on both sides. I can tell you one unifier. If a child dies and it could have been, if a child dies and it could have been prevented, if we had just waited, no matter what side the parent was on, the grief is the same. Same goes for staff. Sincerely, Laura and Justin. I don't have tissues with me here. I'm not set up like I am at. I think the last one, for some reason, it's not showing up for me right now, but the last one was from another parent, Diana Bessiano, who we did reach back out to because it looked like she had submitted an uploaded video or audio content. But when the district reached back out to her, she was another person who thought that she was required to fill out the form in order to watch the meeting. So at some point, I will follow back up and we can think about how to maybe word the communication differently so that people aren't thinking that they have to sign up and in order to watch. Sorry, just talked way too much. I think that's everything, unless I'm missing something that either Mr. Verlingo or Mr. Barrett see that I'm not seeing.
That's everything.
Okay. Okay. So that was it for public participation tonight. We are on communication and adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
There is one slight modification. If you look at the contract for Grady Enterprises on page 4, number 4, it says approve a 1-year extension of the existing contract from July 1 to December of 21. That should read approve an 18-month extension.
Okay. Is that something that we need to get a motion to modify?
No, we can just approve the agenda as modified.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, before I get a motion, I got distracted. I meant to say thank you to anyone who submitted public participation. I know what I would normally say in person is I know it's really sometimes a difficult thing to put yourself out there and to speak to us publicly. I think it's no less difficult to do it in this virtual environment, especially in these times when we all know that things are very charged all the way around. So I just want to say thank you to those who submitted public participation. We appreciate that you were willing to share your thoughts, both with us and with the community. Having totally gotten myself out of order now, is there a motion to approve the agenda tonight as modified or as amended? Sorry.
This is Daphne. I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Mooring. Is there a second?
This is Jennifer. I'll second.
Thanks, Ms. Chrysler. Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston.
Yes.
Thank you. We are on to the superintendent's report. Mr. Barrett?
Thank you. We just have one thing to talk about tonight. We'd like to do a presentation on our restart plan. And so Jill Elliott's going to pull that up for us. So, Joe, we can't see the presentation yet. There you go.
Now?
It says double click to enter full screen. I think it says you've started sharing, but it's not up yet.
I'll try it one more time and then maybe you should try it.
Okay.
There. Now it's disappeared.
Want me to give it a try?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hang on.
I'm gonna go back to the beginning slide.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Oh, wrong one. Okay. Do you see it now? Beginning, and I'll go to presentation mode. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. It's loading right now. So we have a presentation we'd like to share with you tonight about our back to school plans for the 2021 school year. This has been a very difficult plan to build, and there's been a lot of deliberation with different groups of people. And our goal has been to prioritize the safety and well-being of staff and students above all else, to implement a plan that allows for the most face-to-face learning as possible, to provide options for families so they can determine what works best for their students and their families, and to adjust and adapt as guidance and recommendations change from the Ohio Department of Health, but in our jurisdiction, the Franklin County Public Health. And so we did a great deal of deliberation, and there were a lot of things to consider, both from Governor DeWine, the Ohio Department of Education, the Ohio Department of Health, and again, Franklin County Public Health. Franklin County Public Health has been very responsive, and I can't say enough about how quickly they get back to us and have given us guidance. And so that partnership has been incredible. And I know they're working tirelessly. I know they're hiring lots of people to help schools and other agencies and businesses navigate through the COVID-19 crisis. So in the spring, we did a series of surveys. We did a summer option survey, and then Jill Elliott, Assistant Superintendent Jill Elliott, and our curriculum team created a task force on teaching and learning. So it was made up of 70 teachers and administrators and staff to look at a hybrid option and to look at a couple different hybrid options and to look at distance learning. And so this was really well organized. Groups met separately together at first, and then at the end came together at the end of every day, but they met separately in groups to consider the options and to come up with ideas, to brainstorm, to look at logistics. And it was not an easy task. And we also have a health and safety task force made up of custodians, administrative assistants, nurses, maintenance folks, our business director. And so that group is also helping us find our way through how to make things as safe as possible. And then we also sent out a learning selection form. We just extended the deadline for that. So the deadline for that selection form will be on July 19th at midnight. And then just yesterday, we sent out a staff return selection form asking staff what their preference would be in terms of what option, hybrid or distance learning model they would like to to teach in. And we know there's just so many thought bubbles and questions that so many people have. And there are so many different feelings and emotions. And we know that the options that we've provided, neither of them are ideal. That whatever option families choose, it's going to be difficult for them. People are trying to pay their mortgages. They're trying to pay their rent. They're trying to, sustain their way of life. And it's just very, very hard. And those considerations have weighed heavily on us, and as has safety, the safety of our students, the safety of our teachers. And so we all have this stream of consciousness, I think, and all these different thoughts coming in, and there's just no easy answers, and really solutions that are flawed. And so the guidance that we've gotten from the Ohio Department of Health and Franklin County Public Health has been to, and also documents like from the American Academy of Pediatricians and countless documents from across the country, reopening plans and Sacramento we've read, and really just a plethora of research and things that we've looked at. So the guidance we've gotten from Franklin County Public Health, and we've met with them multiple times, is to practice 6 feet of social distancing, to implement a face covering policy, to ask parents to vigilantly assess for symptoms, and to wash and sanitize our hands frequently, and to have that happen throughout a school day, and then to thoroughly clean and sanitize our school environment to limit the spread on shared surfaces. Face coverings are essential to safety in our hybrid option, and for all staff and K-12 students, and in our buildings and on our buses. So masks are recommended for preschool, but not required. And we'll work with families on an individual basis to navigate situations where masks may be difficult, especially in our special needs population. And students are encouraged to bring their own face coverings with them to school. And we will also have masks available if someone forgets theirs or they need one. I'm going to turn it over to Jill Elliott, our assistant superintendent, and she's going to talk about the 2 learning models.
Thanks, Steve. So as Steve mentioned, this has been a long, difficult process, and we know that there are so many perspectives that come into play in this situation. And so throughout this entire process, we've just really tried to be mindful of all of those components, the science piece, the fear piece, and just really trying to create the best plan possible. So we did, as Steve said, we were able to take a look at the results from the spring survey after teachers and families had, lived remote learning that we were thrust into, and really reflect on what went well from that, what didn't go well from that, and use that information, as we were planning. We knew that we needed to take a look at several options, which is when we sent out the summer option survey. And at that point in time, we were considering 6 options, not knowing exactly where Franklin County was headed with the virus at that time. And at a previous board meeting, I was able to share the results of that survey. We had about 56% of the respondents choose a traditional return as their first choice vote. And about 50% of the respondents chose all distance learning as their 6th choice. So, definitely from that survey, strong support when we looked at the votes in the full return. But at that point in time, the guidance we were getting, we just didn't feel like that was a viable option, which then led us to narrow down to two choices. That would be an all distance option and a hybrid option. And as Steve said, we took a lot of time to process those 2 options. We are still processing them. We are definitely taking a look at the health and safety considerations very closely. But at this point in time, we have aligned our plan options to the alert levels that were released on July 2nd by the governor. So Steve, if you want to go to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
So back on July 2nd, the governor shared an alert level system with us. And like many other districts, we use the alert levels to align our learning model options. Currently, we are in level 3, red. And so we have our hybrid learning option, as well as you'll see along the bottom of this chart that's been updated since we initially sent it out, that families also had the choice for the distance learning for their family. And we've shared before, but we are constantly monitoring information that's shared with us. And in the event that we would have improved levels, alert levels to level 2 or level 1, that would be the point where we would work to shift back to what we consider that traditional model. Certainly allowing families to continue choosing distance learning if that was what was best for them. Headed the other direction, which we definitely don't want to reach, but at level 4, where severe exposure and spread is among us, that's when we would be transitioning into an all distance learning model for students across the district. So, currently we sit at level 3, and so we have families currently making their selections and choosing between the hybrid model and distance learning, which we will, talk a little bit more about in the upcoming slides. So first, should things improve in the near future, this slide outlines what our level 2 or level 1 option or programming would look like. And that would be a full return to the building. We would certainly have our regular program of studies maintained. We would definitely have health and safety components to keep considering, of course, a face covering expectation, which at that point in time would potentially be adjusted. However, definitely still needing the face coverings because we would still be in what's considered a public emergency. Another component to that is we would have parents assessing student health before school. We would continue with increased daily and weekly cleaning and disinfecting protocols. And at that point, you know, if we were in a full return, we would limit non-essential visitors and volunteers. So it would look a little bit like what we started to do in the spring before the school building closure, where we were really starting to kind of tighten the reins there so that we could ensure, you know, we're keeping our staff and students safe. In this model, social distancing guidance would move back to 3 feet. So we would still be mindful of keeping space. And at this point, you know, we would have locker restrictions, but lockers could be used at that point. Meals would be provided in buildings, and recess would certainly be occurring, but at that point with the 3 feet of social distancing, and athletic and extracurricular activities would be permitted to happen following at that point the OHSAA and Franklin County Public Health guidance as well. With all of our models, actually, the distance learning students are permitted to participate in athletics and extracurriculars. That's definitely been a question we've been receiving and want families to know that. And in this all-in, all-person learning model, transportation at that point would look similar. It would be 2 students per seat on a bus, still requiring face coverings, and still having increased safety and cleaning protocols. So definitely still a lot of safety, health and safety restrictions and protocols in place, but because of the alert level, we would be able to go back into a full building return. The next slide outlines our hybrid model. And this is currently one of the learning models that is available for our families. We've mentioned before an adjusted start date, and this evening on the agenda, we are recommending an adjusted calendar, which we have a couple in a few slides. We'll show that. Students will be grouped into 2 groups. We all have a Tuesday, Thursday rotating Monday group and a Wednesday, Friday rotating Monday group. And, you know, this particular schedule we've shared, we have professional development and teacher work days and holidays that often fall on Mondays. And so that's what led us to choose Monday as the rotating day so that no one group was missing more days of school than others. In the hybrid model, we will be asking parents to assess student health before school, looking for symptoms, checking temperatures, and certainly, you know, keeping your student home if they are experiencing any of those symptoms. We've shared face coverings will be required for all staff, which was part of the plan from the beginning once the governor had released that information, and also K-12 students per district expectations. We have shared that it will be recommended for preschool students, but not required. But we will certainly, as Mr. Barrett shared earlier, work with families on an individual basis if wearing a mask is you know, not appropriate for a particular student. We are working really hard on, you know, protocols for the increased daily and weekly cleaning. When we start back, you know, we will be restricting visitors. Only essential visitors will be allowed in and would be restricted to the main office. So we would cut down on, you know, guest speakers and assemblies and things at that point, which connects to the social distancing. Also, the last point there about the large group events, that's not something we'll be able to have at this point in time. As far as social distancing goes, 6 feet is what we are working with. Lockers are going to be prohibited when we return. And in this model, we're working currently on some traffic patterns and just ways to maintain that social distancing. As we know, especially at the high school where there are crowded hallways, we have talked with the health department. And because students will be wearing masks and, you know, passing each other fairly quickly, that's not, you know, there's certainly inherent risk, but that's not a high concern area at this time. In the hybrid model, meals will be served in buildings. We are currently working through plans around what that looks like. Our goal is to be able to maintain social distancing and have meals served in the cafeterias and extended spaces. We will have the grab and go meals available for students in need during their at-home days, as well as those, of course, on distance learning. And then recess restrictions will maintain the 6 feet of social distancing as well. And we're still kind of sifting through some of the specifics around recess. We definitely know how important that is for our students. And on our call with Franklin County Public Health yesterday, we were able to process recess a little bit further. So we'll have some more information coming out about that soon. Athletics and extracurriculars are able to occur. We have specialized plans that have been submitted and approved and will continue. And also, as previously mentioned, distance learning students are permitted to participate in those as well. And we will have some spectator restrictions just because of the alert level we're under. With transportation, 6 feet of social distancing is always the goal. And that's what we'll be shooting for on the buses as well in the hybrid model. We have been told by the Franklin County Public Health Department that 2 students per seat on a bus would be permissible. However, our transportation director has been working on a plan where we could, work as best as possible to have single students in seats and potentially just have siblings together. So that's something we're still working out. But in this particular model, 2 students per seat on a bus is allowable as well. We would require face coverings on the buses though, and certainly have increased safety and cleaning protocols in place as well. So this slide, helps to outline hybrid model expectations a little bit. I've talked some about the in-person piece already. We're working to replicate a regular school day as much as possible on those in-building days. Students will still have their core courses of art, language arts, math, social studies, science, and then certainly the related arts and elective courses are important as well, and we'll be maintaining those. However, there may be some adjustments on timing and format and such for particular classes. We will have traditional school hours in effect with the hybrid model. And I mentioned before the 2 different groups. We will also be utilizing the traditional grading system and the traditional attendance system. The at-home learning experience, I know that this is something that a lot of families are wondering about, and we're still working with our teachers through, complete plans related to this. We do expect students to engage completely in, work and assignments that are given. We will have assignments for students and activities for students that reinforce the learning that's happened in the classroom when they've been there, allows them to practice, and also does some front loading. And as previously shared, we're definitely looking for ways to engage students virtually. We have to be really clear that, it just wouldn't be possible for our teachers to teach, a group of students in front of them and do distance learning the way, families that chose distance learning is going to look. But we certainly want to make sure that we can engage students and keep them connected with what's going on in the classroom as much as possible. So we're going to be continuing to work through that. But much like the distance learning at home days, students are expected to be fully engaged and available during school hours to complete their work and assignments and connection activities. There's a bullet under the hours piece. Hours will certainly vary depending on grade level and learning activities for the day. So that's something that you'll learn a little bit more about in the coming weeks. And traditional grading will be in place, as well as attendance and participation tracking on those at-home days. So this is just a nice visual that kind of helps to understand, the hybrid grouping rotations. So you'll see there, week 1, we will have a hybrid blue and a hybrid gold group. And so the hybrid blue, could be in the building Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, 1 week, and at home that week on Wednesday, Friday. with gold, the gold group being in building Wednesday, Friday, and at home Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then, you know, a switch the following week where blue would be in person on Tuesday and Thursday, which is their consistent days each week, and then at home Monday, Wednesday, Friday with the reverse for gold. So this just kind of helps to outline that. And then the next slide shows our actual school calendar. I know it's not super giant, it's not giant for you to see, but you will notice it's color coded to help families with their hybrid groups and which days they would be attending. I will note that the way the days ended up shaking out, you'll notice it's small on the screen, but the first asterisk at the bottom says that the hybrid blue group has 2 consecutive Mondays in November and April to help balance out the total days. So once we were able to go through, you know, the Wednesday, Friday, and the Tuesday, Thursday, and start distributing those Mondays, we worked really hard to just make sure over the course of the year, both groups had the same number of school days for the year. And so in the first semester, you know, one group actually has 1 more day, and in the second semester, it's the reverse, but everyone ends with the same number of days. You'll also notice in the recommended calendar that we have pushed we are recommending that the start of school be backed up to August 24th. And so, you know, we are really focused on quality and wanting to make sure our teachers feel supported and have the professional development that they need and the time to plan for quality learning experiences. And so that's the reason for the delayed start, to support our teachers so that they can support our kids. The next slide starts to outline some of the distance learning components. So this is related to us going to level 4 and purple. However, these components also apply then to those families that would select distance learning in the current alert level 3. So at this point in time, school buildings would be closed. All GJPS students would be learning online, similar to the way it happened in the spring, however, which with increased expectations and experiences. We would have the regular academic offerings as well as related arts and elective classes. But this is something, as far as course offerings, we'll have to just really keep close tabs on. As far as, you know, if we do transition into this model and when that happens, will play a big role in that, because we'll have some families, some students on the distance learning format while hybrid is happening. And that's a huge strain on our staffing. And so we'll have some adjustments to make there. And then if we were to transition into full distance learning, you know, that's something we would have to really carefully consider, you know, what that transition looks like and how it impacts course offerings. With child nutrition, we would implement the full grab and go meals as we did in the spring, that would be available at select schools for any students in need. And then here under the student expectation piece, you know, it's just this idea that, you know, in the spring it was different, and we were really, you know, thrust into this new way of learning. And you know, we learned a lot in that situation, both from the teaching side and the student side. And so regarding expectations, you know, students would be expected to actively engage in their learning activities and follow all guidelines related to behavior, academic integrity, student attendance. All of those things would be tracked in a normal fashion, as well as traditional grading. Teachers would be using live lessons to engage students regularly and would have daily office hours to provide support, as well as more streamlined communication. That was definitely some feedback that we heard from the spring. You know, our teachers did a wonderful job putting together these plans so quickly, but we know that it was, you know, tough on families trying to help their students at home and having information in multiple places. So we really have been working on a streamlined approach there. And then, unfortunately, as well as with, you know, shutting down of the school buildings at this point, our athletic practices, competitions, and extracurricular activities would be canceled as well.
Jill, could I just add on this model that as we kind of look at the hybrid and distance choice in in alert level red. I just want to reiterate something we had in our FAQ, that Jill and her team have worked tirelessly to try to figure out how to use our own teachers for the distance learning. We think it's going to be best to use our own teachers and our own curriculum. And that's what this model would be. But the distance learning model with the hybrid will be, we're going to try to do the same thing, but we may not be able to staff it. So in the FAQ, we did talk about a third-party provider we might use. We're hoping we don't have to do that, but I just want to mention that caveat.
Hey Jill, maybe just, this is Jennifer. Just for clarification on that last slide. So this distance learning model, while it also, and this is maybe like a statement and a question, it also, while it reflects the purple code system, because it also reflects the schedule and the expectations for people who choose the distance model in the
current situation.
Maybe point out a caveat that athletics and extracurriculars in the current situation are still valid for people who choose that model. To kind of point that out.
That's excellent. That's an excellent point. Because currently we are permitted to be holding sports and extracurriculars. And so those that choose distance learning, those are happening now. However, if we went to level 4 and we were all at that point with this would be canceled. Thank you, Jennifer, for that clarification. I also wanted to expand a little bit on what Steve had mentioned regarding the third-party vendor, because I know in one of the public participation readings that Burrell did, there was a question about what the third-party vendor option would look like. And so that's essentially a lot of Central Ohio districts are using this, but it's essentially a purchased curriculum, and there are pre-recorded lessons and online work. And, essentially students are kind of working through those online courses, and it would be monitored then by teachers. So again, that's not, it's not what we want to have to do. However, depending on, how staffing and scheduling works out, it might be something we have to consider a little further. So this slide, this should look familiar to families. We did share this in our FAQ document. It's just a look of some sample schedules. We're certainly still working through things. We have made some adjustments so that, the grade levels are looking at block scheduling, and there are definitely some benefits to block scheduling. I think in general, working online is a little bit of a clunkier choice. And so, having blocks allows us to have longer periods of time so that students aren't feeling rushed, going from class to class, and teachers aren't feeling rushed to put something, get things finished before, the end of the period. Also frees up a little bit of screen time in a sense, because of the way we will utilize a catch and release model of, having kids together and doing some independent work and trying to come back together. So this is just a sample of what it might look like. We are still working through final details, of course, and there's a lot that goes into it regarding staffing and, the families that pick distance learning, what those schedules look like for students. So, but this is just a snapshot for families to have an idea.
Jill, one of the main questions that I've been receiving as far as emails and stuff from concerned parents is that the commitment for the whole year, they're saying they would like to possibly do distance learning, and say the situation changes as far as maybe there's a vaccine or there's something that comes up mid-year. So they were more concerned about committing for the whole year to the distance learning model, and not, there's no leadway. They're saying there's no leadway to say the situation changes. There's a if then or if but situation. They were wondering, why are we so committed to committing to something that, say we go to a yellow or another color,
right?
We're still committed to the distance model. Whereas January, things, you're talking about several months from now, it could be totally different. And I really didn't know how we would approach that.
Right. So I think that's a really great question because it's a great opportunity to provide some clarifying information. We are asking families to make the year-long commitment, and we understand that is really difficult. But as mentioned before, there are so many staffing implications, and it's really tricky if, say, a few students choose to go back into the hybrid model, but it's not enough to say we don't need that teacher anymore. And then we might, depending on, of course, where students are from, we might not be able to fit them into a class. Or so it's one of those things that I think it's just super tricky because of the way staffing and curricular adjustments are being made. I think, as I mentioned before, many other districts are using third-party vendor curriculums, and so that's a little bit different than us trying our best to have our teachers doing the instruction with our kids, which I think is really good for our kids if we can pull it off. We mentioned that if the alert level changes, we will then make a shift, and we want everyone to know that shift would be open to everybody. And so, if we make that shift at semester break, if you pick distance learning, the door is open. You can come back in also. However, the choice is also there for you to maintain distance learning. And so, we again have to take a look at staffing and curriculum pieces, but that's one thing we did want to clarify. If the alert level changes, then certainly that would be an opportunity for families.
Yeah, so Brian mentioned that, I think it's the third question in our FAQ, that if we go to orange or yellow, then families would be able to opt out of their year-long commitment.
So the next slide,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a question about these sample schedules?
Mm-hmm.
I see that for the elementary, they'll have a morning meeting,
mm-hmm.
but I don't see any kind of middle school or high school community building kind of piece. And we've invested so much in all of this social, emotional, mental health. And we've heard some amazing programs that are going on at some of our middle schools with the families, or I think that's the right word, and how important that is for kids showing up and feeling involved. How are we executing that for the middle and high?
Yeah, that's a great question. So morning meeting specifically is connected to conscious discipline, which is our elementary, PBIS program across the district. We do have time built in our scheduling right now for a lot of community building and relationship building at all levels in the initial days of school. And then you'll notice that at the upper levels, there is an extra 15 minutes in their periods also. Not necessarily devoted specifically to that every day, but that's a great opportunity for some of that relationship building to happen as well. So we don't.
It's not intentional. It's just if they get it done, and if it's something that particular teacher has a flavor for, I guess I'm not convinced that'll actually happen.
Okay, so I think that's something we can continue looking at. And just revising. I know, as I mentioned before, these are just kind of samples to get us going. So we'll keep reflecting on that as we're working with the teachers on how to make sure that's intentional at all levels.
And so how does the principal communicate during a typical week with a distance model?
So, a lot of it will depend on how numbers shake out. So we've had some conversations about potential administrative oversight changes. So if we have a fourth grade class that has, I'm just making this up, 20 students from High Point and 5 students from Blacklick, at that point in time, Kath Earhart would kind of be the oversight of that because it's a majority High Point students. And that principal at that point would be embedded in helping with the communication and connecting with families. So a lot of it will depend on how numbers shake out, but we will kind of have designated support for our distance learning students and families.
Before anyone else asks any questions, can we let Jill and Steve finish the presentation and kind of, I know I
Sorry.
have a couple questions. No, it's okay. I just want to let them get finished with the full presentation so they don't lose their train of thought. And then we can all, I'll make sure that I ask each board member if they have questions, because I think we probably all do. And we'll try not to bombard you guys, but let's let them finish first.
Yeah, could I, just so I don't forget to say this, Daphne, your point is really well taken. And one of the reasons I think when distance learning went well in the spring, part of the reason it went well, and there were things that you know, we're looking at to, you know, ways to strengthen what happened. But students had 3/4 of a school year to build relationships with one another and their teachers. And so we're not going to have that in this model. And so that is a concern. So building relationships and taking time to do that will be really important at all levels. So I think your point is well taken. One of the reasons we want to, you know, change the calendar to have some more days is to build in strategies to do that work. But I'm worried about starting the school year when relationships haven't been forged in distance learning. So that's a concern that we have to be mindful of and address.
And the other piece I will say, you know, Daphne, there's not a specific morning meeting block, but we do have, you'll see down in that 2:15 to 3:30 slot, you know, that study hall, social, emotional, SEL time. And so again, it does depend somewhat on student schedules, but we do, you know, plan to kind of work in some more support in that area throughout the day, but we'll continue processing it and thinking about the best ways to get that done. So this next slide just kind of brings us to where we are right now for our families. You know, the learning model selection form went out. We originally had the due date being this past Tuesday, but definitely realized and heard from the community that, you know, some families really needed more information before they could feel comfortable with the decision. We did have a couple thousand really quick responses in the first couple days, and now we are up to just over 5,800 responses. And so we do have some duplicates. So for any family out there listening, I would just, you know, say that, you know, if you're not sure that it was submitted, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to check it out for you. We do have emails that will be going out to families once the survey closes, just to kind of confirm this is the selection we have for you. So know that if you're curious about that, you'll get that opportunity to double check. We also did share in our FAQ that because we chose then to extend the deadline, we know that some families had already completed their selections. And so if you are wanting to change your selection choice, you can send me an email and I'll take care of that for you. I have had several families that have chosen to make some choices. We will be accepting changes until the survey closes on July 19th, because then at that point, the next day is when we start, you know, getting really busy with working out the staffing decisions. So I think at this point, I'm going to pass it back over to Steve, and he's going to share some more information.
Yeah, so there's just a few more things we'd like to go over. We've been working with Franklin County Public Health on what to do with there's a positive case. And I think they're in the process of developing an infographic and a flow chart for districts. But here's what we know now. Individuals who test positive will be quarantined for 14 days. Contact tracing will be conducted in collaboration with Franklin County Public Health. We will try to be as helpful as we can with that. I think it's incumbent upon us to try to build a relationship with them so that we can get to families quickly. And in some cases, we'll be reaching out to families if their child has been exposed. Any person who's considered exposed by Franklin County Public Health will be quarantined for 14 days before returning to school. And before returning to school, individuals who test positive must come back symptom-free. And we believe what we're going to do is have them check in with our nurses just to have their temperature taken and to have clearance by a doctor on letterhead We think that'll be important as well. It's going to be important for families to monitor, for symptom checks every day. So we're going to ask families to monitor their child's health every single day, to take their temperature, and to not send students to school if the temperature is 100 degrees or higher. And that means without medication. And we're going to ask parents to keep their child at home if symptoms, and be symptom free without medication for 72 hours. That's very important. And then before a child can ride the bus, we need to make sure that our nurse confirms that they're symptom free. So we're going to ask parents to bring the child to school so that we can take their temperature. Symptoms are fever, cough, shortness of breath, body aches. And those are important to monitor as well, not just temperature. As we built this plan, an incredible amount of work went into it from our teachers, our principals, our curriculum team, Jill Elliott and her staff, Judy Hengstepek, our communications director. And, this has been such a fluid and dynamic process that as soon as we write something, we put something in print, what happens is inevitably it can change. And so keeping in mind this is what we know now. We want to, make sure we understand that everyone understands that we're going to be adaptable, we're going to be agile, and we appreciate everyone's patience. We know this isn't easy. And so as we conclude the presentation, I just want to say that we all want to be back in school. We all want to be in the buildings with teachers. I think we've put to bed maybe forever that in classroom learning, can be replaced by computer learning. We know it's the richest form of learning because it's born out of a relationship that students build with one another and their teachers. And it breaks our heart that we're not able to do that at this time. We're in Franklin County. We're on red, which is level 3, and we're going to follow the recommendations of Franklin County Public Health. We forged a really good relationship with Joe Mazzola and Alex Jones. We talk to them regularly and other members of their team. And so it's really important to know that this is the safest plan we can develop. Also keeping in mind that, mental health is such an important part of this. One of the key principles in the American Pediatricians document is, the American Academy of Pediatricians document is the fact that kids need to be in school, because when they're not in school, they can become isolated and depressed, and all kinds of bad things can happen. And so this is really a tough decision. I know for our families, this has been a really tough number of decisions for us. And we just appreciate your patience and support. We know this is really, really tough, that families are faced with some of the biggest decisions in this crisis that they've ever been faced with in the lives of their children. And we are very mindful of that. And so we're hoping that Franklin County can get to a level orange, or even better, a level yellow, so that we can be in school and with everyone there and still take the necessary precautions of masks and some social distancing, but not as much as 6 feet. We're hoping that can happen. There are many positive things happen. I mean, probably many of you have seen some of the clinical trials on vaccines for Moderna and others. There's lots of things in play here that are positive. But right now, we're under a red alert level 3, and we can't be back in school full force in the traditional sense. And that makes us really sad. So thank you for listening tonight. We really appreciate it. And we can turn it over to the board for any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Mr. Barrett. I know you probably have some more things that you want to talk about in your superintendent's report, but I think it probably makes sense to just go through the board members and see if we have any questions about the reopening plan before you move on. Did you have one more thing you wanted to say?
Just, we did a lovely site visit today, walked around, climbed up on a ladder and went to the second floor of the new Lincoln Elementary. The cement floor has been poured on the second floor. The bottom floor, the first floor will be poured next week. It's really going up and it's incredible. You know, when you drive by, which I've done many times, you see, you know, just the facade of the building. When you actually walk on the ground and see the detention pond and all the different aspects of the building, and you walk in and you see you're standing in what will be the cafeteria or what will be the gym. It's really exciting. So we wore the wrong shoes today, so we got a little dirty. But I would like to maybe invite the board to do what we did today and go through a walkthrough maybe in the next week or so. And then in 4 or 5 weeks, as things get even more kind of toward the finish, we have a long way to go, you know, doing it again. So what we'll do is reach out to you and ask when would be a good time. Probably the morning would be the best, but I would love for all of you to see it. I think it'll do your heart good.
That would be great. We could all use some heart goodness. I think I'm just gonna, because I'm guessing that there might be a few questions that each of us has. I think to keep this organized, I'll just go through each board member and see if they have questions so that we're not talking all over each other. Mr. Hairston, did you have any questions or comments about the superintendent's report?
No.
Oh, okay. You got yours out. Let's see, Ms. Chrysler, did you have any questions or comments about the superintendent's report?
I did have two questions. The first is that I know in the FAQ, which I really appreciated, it was, I thought, very thorough and answered a lot of questions that I know we had in our family, and I think people that were reaching out to us had as well. In that FAQ, it did talk about the fact that there would be no field trips. I've received some subsequent questions from people who either had the, I think it's called like the Great West trip in the spring delayed, and it was supposed to be delayed to fall, and now the Washington DC trip. And so could you speak to whether or not the no field trip policy is inclusive of those trips, and just maybe either today or in the future provide some guidance to families who may need to you know, request refunds or have an expectation that might not be realized if they were hoping to take the West trip sometime during the fall season?
Yeah, unfortunately, and this is what's so heartbreaking about this is we know students look forward to these trips and they very much want to take part in them. It's unlikely that we will be doing any of those trips this year. And so we will likely make sure the parents can get refunds for those trips. I know the orchestra had a trip that they were looking forward to at New York City. And, you know, they got a refund for the trip. It didn't get everything back, and Broadway kind of went dark, and we were questioning, you know, why did that happen? But hopefully we can get as much of a refund for those trips as possible. And it's just unfortunate. We'd love to be able to have those trips happen.
Okay. I think that's great. And then I also, it seems that there had this testing and I think the protocol that you described, because there's a lot of concern with what happens for kids who choose a hybrid model, or teachers who choose to teach in the classroom. And then there is a positive case or a suspected positive case. So I think your explanation with respect to the chart and the flow chart and how the determination is made for people who might be exposed to get quarantined. I guess my follow-up question to that is, I think there could end up being a stigma attached to children who test positive. And so I just wonder if part of the mental health discussion yet has been whether or not there's going to be specific training for students and for teachers with respect to, because we want people to be accountable and we want them to be honest, and we don't want kids to be afraid to not come to school if they have symptoms because they're going to be made fun of for being the kid with COVID. And so I guess any thoughts or any discussions around that you could potentially share, or commitments to start having those discussions as you move through the curriculum mapping.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great point, Jennifer, and definitely will be part of our trainings and our conversations with teachers at the beginning of the year. I think also doing our best to educate students, and so that they understand, the components of the virus and the benefits of the quarantine and all those types of things. But we absolutely want to be mindful of, the tough situation that kids could be put in. And I think that it's a great opportunity to work into our community building and our family building. And like you said, those social emotional connections we make. So we'll definitely be mindful of that and be sure we are working that in.
I appreciate that. And then I guess the last thing is a statement. I mean, this is really hard, and I hear the tone in your voices. I mean, this isn't something that you're presenting with, this joyful type of, presentation. But I think personally, I've heard a wide range of feelings and emotions from people in the community about returning to school. And what's interesting to me is that they're very wide reaching and very polarized. And so you have people who are, reading the comments on Facebook who are like, 5 days a week, get to school, what's wrong with you people? And then you have even some of the comment that we heard tonight, which was the complete opposite. And I think there's the groups that are stuck in the middle with just a tremendous amount of anxiety and confusion and concern. And so I do appreciate your time tonight. It's really hard to answer questions about something that we don't have a lot of answers to as a nation. And so I really appreciate your efforts to try to answer as many questions as you have the ability to answer, and to try to continually respond and lead people through this. And it's something that nobody's ever done before. And so I just ask for, back when this started, you had asked for grace, right? And that was one of the things that we wanted to give to our students, is the grace to kind of get through the loss of the rest of the school year, the loss of graduation, the loss of prom, the loss of all of these things. And so I do encourage the community to give grace to our administrators and teachers as well, who are really trying to navigate the right path, and we're in uncharted waters, and there's definitely strong opinions on either side of this. And so I appreciate the position that you're in, and appreciate the hard work that you've put into this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think, one of the things I think when we hear, let's go back full time, 5 days a week, and there are some school districts and counties that, have less infection, less spread that may do that. And that's a bitter pill to swallow. Like, how come they get to, and maybe we don't, because of where we are and the level of alert we're under. But then it changes. So some of those counties went red today. And so it's really a hard thing to kind of figure out. And when you look at it, our job is to make sure we give kids the best opportunity to learn we can. That's what we're called to do. But we're also an employer, and we also have, teachers and bus drivers and kitchen workers and custodians, and they have families, and so it's just really important that we balance all of those things. I think sometimes it's hard to kind of keep all of that in mind as you see things steadily develop and you see them whole. It's not an easy thing to kind of balance all of those things. And I also get the heartbreak that families are going through, that it's really, really hard to decide what to do when two parents work. Or we've heard a lot from families that are divorced or separated. It's like, how are they going to do visitation? How are they going to navigate through school? And none of this is easy. And it just feels, the only word I can think of is heartbreaking when you talk to families that are struggling with these things, and it's real. It's the hardest thing they've ever had to do. And certainly for us, for me, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to be a part of in my career, hands down. So we just wish we could give families better options than we've given them. That's what makes it tough.
I am still going to go last. So Ms. Mooring, do you have any comments or questions?
I do have two questions. One, clearly we're going to be doing a lot of cleaning and masks. Do we feel that we will be able to have the supply of PPE or sanitation needs that we will? I mean, it's less than a month away, basically.
Yes. Scott Lofton and his team have been doing a good job looking to buy PPE, hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes, masks, both for the size of elementary kids and adults, and signs, stickers, different things that we're going to need. And our goal, he's got this incredible goal to get hand sanitizer dispensers in every single classroom. Right now we have them in hallways, but we want them in every single classroom. And we also want to, build in hand washing time during the day. Soap and water is better than hand sanitizer. And so we want to make sure that we build in time during the day to do it. One of the reasons we wanted to adjust our calendar was to work with principals who know their buildings better than anyone about one direction hallways and how are we going to navigate through this in the safest way possible. And so I was asked a lot of different things about that, recently. And I think, we're looking at filtration systems for air to try to make the ventilation better. Scott's really working hard to find ways to bring in more outside air into the classroom. So it's just there's a lot to consider, and I'm really proud of the work Scott and his team are doing. They're working tirelessly on this as well.
That inspired us another question. Do we have the ability to move have classes go outside for periods during the day, fresh air, spacing, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we've thought of that. I think that would be a good idea. Definitely outside is better than inside. And so, we've talked about, could we get some pop-ups so that kids could sit under them because it'll be hot. We haven't pursued that idea to fruition yet, but definitely being outside is a great alternative when it's possible. You have to worry about bee stings and all those sorts of things, but it might be an option.
And then lastly, it appeared on a couple of the slides that the school nurses are going to be point people, and I'm a little concerned because we have some nurses that cover 3 schools, right? Do we have any concern about their ability to cover all that is needed?
Well, I think in some cases we also have clinic aides that can help. So yeah, it's going to be a daunting task for them as well. We were able to kind of purchase some new thermometers for each of our clinics that are smart thermometers that can connect to an app. And so I think we've been, Beth Brandt, one of our nurses, is on our health and safety team. And so she has been reading things and giving us information. And so our nurses will be poised to help us, and we'll lean on them a great deal. I think with the clinic aides, we'll be okay, but we'll be mindful of, is it too overwhelming, and look at what we need to do. we will be using some of the CARES Act money. And Mike, we just learned about some new funds that will be available for the added expenses. I mean, doing a school year with COVID-19 is going to be very expensive, and these are not expenses we planned for, but we are getting a little bit of help on it as well. Mike, do you want to talk about that, or is it too soon?
Yes, we did receive, or at least we're allocated a certain amount for the initial CARES Act funding. The governor, or at least there's been a set aside of $100 million, and an allocation was just released yesterday that indicated we would receive to about $394,000 for our district. Not set in stone, but it is definitely very probable. And then there are still funds at the state level related to CARES Act that has not been allocated, that the governor has not indicated how that would be distributed. So we do expect to potentially receive some additional funding.
Super. I guess, poor Steve, 3 weeks ago, I was probably one of those people that said, wouldn't 5 days a week be more intelligent than a hybrid, because those other 3 days that they're not in school, they could be multiply getting contagious, right? In different places and times. So in my mind, it was safer. But the reality is we are over capacity with students right now, and we just physically cannot do it. So that's why we have a levy and a bond on the November ballot, so that we could have adequate spacing for our students. So I thank you for all the work that you, Jill, Mike, everybody on the team has put into this. I get it. It's no fun. I'm with you. It's just a horrible, horrible situation to be in, but we don't have pandemics very often, right? So we didn't quickly know how to act, but I appreciate all your work.
Thanks, Daphne.
Mr. Campbell, any comments or questions from you?
I have 3 quick questions regarding attendance, busing, and recess. So the first question is, how are we taking attendance, whether a student is hybrid or online or distance learning? Second question is, are we asking our bus drivers to do additional duty in overseeing the activities in their bus? It's already a difficult job. So what do we have in place to support the bus drivers for that? And the final question is, how do we keep students apart from each other by 6 feet at recess? That's all.
Do you want to go, Jill? What are you going to say?
So regarding attendance, Matt, much like everything, we're still working out final details. We are intending to be tracking attendance through, in the distance model, through virtual connection, virtual participation in the lessons that will be happening, as well as when needed, if there doesn't happen to be a live lesson on a particular day, the engagement, the logging in, the completion of the tasks and the assignments that need to be done. We did just get some more attendance guidance from the Ohio Department of Education today. I haven't had time to read that document yet, but we'll make sure that we are complying with their guidance and tracking mechanisms also. And then as far as the hybrid model goes, certainly the in-building attendance is the easiest in the whole thing for us. And then the at-home days will be similar to the distance learning, although we know there won't be, all the virtual connection opportunities. So it will be through completion of assignments and logging into, their online programs and things like that on those days. I will say, in connection to students that maybe are put in quarantine and aren't able to come to school on their assigned in-building days, certainly we will work with families and work to make sure that they're connected in the best way possible to make sure that that instruction continues. Steve, do you want to add anything to attendance before we move on to the next one?
No.
Okay. As far as bus drivers are concerned, I think one of the one of the benefits of this particular situation, that we'll have less kids on the buses, of course. And so, that helps with the management situations. But certainly, as I said before, we'll have siblings sitting together and, as many single student seats as possible. And so, we're hoping that there aren't huge increases in oversight. However, of course, the mask wearing is a component that's new for bus drivers. And so, through education and, maybe we can have some creative monitoring that happens to support the bus drivers with that piece. But we definitely will be, working with bus drivers to, brainstorm and process what are the best ways to manage those situations.
In fact, we've had a couple of meetings with bus drivers. We had the Bus Drivers Union. We had a meeting today. They have some concerns about safety, and we had a really good discussion. And we talked about things like putting plexiglass up behind the driver's seat, and one of the things they said is they weren't really for that because it's already hot on a bus. So one of their concerns is, how do they wear a mask and drive? If they wear glasses, they fog up. They're just really earnestly trying to think through everything. And so our bus drivers are have a lot of concerns as well. But they're ready to come back. They did an outstanding job for us in the spring, taking meals to families who couldn't get to our grab and go pickups. So we have so many great employees in this district, and they're it's moving when you talk to them, and you can see how much they've been thinking. And this is on everybody's mind constantly.
And then the third question, Matt, was related to maintaining 6 feet of social distancing at recess. It's just magically going to happen, Matt. So certainly in our call with the Franklin County Public Health Department today, we had some conversations about recess. And as I mentioned earlier, we're still sifting through some of the guidance that they provided to us and have some follow-up questions. Steve and I joked we had about 2 hours of questions for them, but a 30-minute time slot. So, there will be certain activities that will be permitted, certain activities that won't be permitted, definitely some scheduling that comes into play, certain materials that, and apparatus items on the playgrounds that will be, can be used, and some that can't be used. And so, it's just going to be, we're going to be putting, the best plan in place we can, and constantly reevaluating the best way to keep our kids safe and still, give them that movement time that we know is so important.
Yes, it is. I appreciate that, because I think the teachers and the students both appreciate the fact that recess exists at the buildings.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's important. Thank you.
Yep. One last thing, I think similar to the buses, having half the kids helps with that scenario as well. Just our playgrounds not being quite as, full. Certainly the building principals are working on lunch schedules and, trying to make sure we don't have huge overlaps in grade levels and such. So just everyone's just working together to come up with the best plans possible.
Okay, I have just a couple questions and then a comment. And the questions, I fully understand that there are so many things that there are not answers to now. So the couple questions that I'm going to ask are just ones that I haven't heard any discussion on yet. So if you don't have an answer to them, that is fine. I just want to put them on your radar in case they haven't come in. So one of the questions that I've heard is related to, I guess, what is going on in the virtual environment, either for the kids in the hybrid model when they're on home days, or for the kids who are in the distance learning model, or in the scenario where we're all in a distance learning model. The question has to do with the fact that, I guess, yes, we know that the distance learning that happened in March, April, and May was something that had to be put together very quickly. We've already talked about how difficult all of that was and how hard everybody worked, but we also know that this learning in a virtual environment is going to look a little bit different. But I am hearing some concerns from parents who do work outside of the house full time, wanting to know they want the quality and they want the depth, but they also would like to know if there's going to be any flexibility whatsoever, because parents aren't necessarily available to help support that learning in the virtual environment. So is there going to be and I know this is a hard question to answer, because I know it's not completely planned, like not all of the details are known yet, but I guess just philosophically, is there going to be consideration of that in building the model?
Yeah, I think we absolutely know that every family has, their own special intricacies and definitely schedules to be managing and working through. We do want, to be able to take instruction to the next level and make sure students have, quality instruction, quality connections, and relationship building opportunities. And so certainly, our teachers can be available during the regular school day to provide that and support that. We absolutely will extend grace and compassion again, and work with individual families that are, struggling to kind of work through the daily schedule or need some additional supports or flexibility. I think one thing that we have to be mindful of, that, everything's about balance. We've got to make sure that we are responding to our students and our families' needs, and making sure that we also are having high expectations and, really clear expectations set. So a long-winded way to say, yes, there are going to be some very specific expectations outlined, but we also know that we have to continue to be flexible and work with families, and that some situations will require extended deadlines or opportunities for work to be completed at another time.
I think that where I've heard this question coming from the most is from families who are maybe, so let me back up a little bit. I know that there was consideration about going to a third-party vendor or wanting to use our Gehanna teachers. I understand exactly why we've made the choice, if we can, to use our Gehanna teachers. But what the, I guess, advantage of a third-party vendor offers is that there could be recorded lessons with teachers. And I've heard some discussion in the community, people who are considering leaving the district entirely for models that offer that flexibility. And that, just as somebody who serves on a board of a public school district, that worries me. I mean, obviously we can't reach every single person with every single need, but I know that that's what we try to do. And again, I'm not asking for details right now. I guess I'm just asking that be something in mind when you're building the model, those factors.
Absolutely.
The other question that I have is, and again, you don't have to have an answer to this question, but I've heard a lot of questioning from parents of high school students. Because we have one high school in Gehanna, we have the tremendous advantage of offering a huge depth of curriculum, which is wonderful and amazing. It's a great opportunity for our kids. And I have heard a lot of parents wondering and worrying, is that depth going to be able to be offered in the hybrid model, in the virtual model? It's one thing, I guess, too, like if we can offer it in the hybrid model and then retain it if we have to go all virtual, but can we offer that depth in a choice for a virtual model? And again, I'm not asking for details, just what you know and what you're thinking about.
Sorry, I was on mute. We tried to mention that in the FAQ, that we want to do all the rich elective classes like World War II history and all the things we can do in the hybrid model. And we'd like to be able to do those same things in the distance learning model. I think it'll be difficult, and we did kind of mention that we may not be able to offer everything we normally would, but we're going to make our best effort to do that. I think I just want to visit the previous question you had, Burl, and I think, the reality is that if we use our own teachers and our own curriculum, the curriculum and the instruction is going to be richer. it's going to be more synchronous. You're going to have to kind of be there at the time of the instruction, maybe some recorded lessons to catch up if there's illness or something happens that a child can't be there. But, you know, for a third party vendor, the asynchronous instruction is more readily available, although not as rich. And I would encourage parents that are maybe looking at some of the models out there, Ohio Virtual Academy, TRECA, I would really delve into their track record. Not all of these third-party vendors offer, you know, I would just, without, you know, being too critical, I would just really look at the track record and look at what happens in those models. I think whatever we offer, whether it's third party, even if we offer third party vendor, it'll be our teachers using that curriculum and you know, even if we have a third party vendor, it's not going to be anonymous. Our teachers are going to be known people in our schools, and parents are going to be able to reach out to them. And I, you know, I'm just going to stop talking about that. I think really looking deeply, it will be really important.
Okay, thank you. One more comment, and I don't think you're going to have the answer to this, but I have heard from a couple families who have made the choice already to move into an all virtual plan. I know that we say that extracurriculars and sports are fully available to them, but that is not what they're being told by some of the teachers who manage some of those extracurricular activities. So just wanted to pass that along. You don't have to comment on that. And then lastly, this is a minor point at this point, but I know, Jill, at the beginning of the presentation, you reminded everybody about the initial parent survey that people took, and you talked about the highest percentage choice being a choice for everybody back in the classrooms. I guess I just want to remind everybody fully what that question said, because it wasn't, if we can remember back to what that question said, I think that it said, assuming that it was safe to do so, assuming that the situation was not the situation that we're in. And of course, that would be the choice that we all would make. But I know that's a picky point, but I think it's come up a lot in dialogue among parents, and I think it's an important point to make. I'm going to just say one more thing, and then I will shut up and I guess turn it back to Steve if there's anything else to the superintendent's report. I don't want to reiterate what's already been said, but I do want to personally thank both you, Steve, and Jill. And I want to thank everybody who served on the task force, everybody on the curriculum team, all of our staff who has been involved in any way in any of this and who will continue to be involved in this. I know that summer is traditionally a time that a lot of you are still working, but not working with this kind of pressure and burden on your hearts that I know that you have. And I know that, I mean, I know how I feel, so I can only imagine how you all feel. And I want to say thank you. The care that you have for our kids and for our staff is evident. This is an incredibly difficult situation, one that we have never faced before. None of us have. And I just want to thank you for everything that you're doing to try to navigate and lead through this situation.
Thank you. I want to thank our board for your support and patience. I know this hasn't been easy for any of you either. And we all want to do the best we can for students and our families. And when we're kind of dealt a hand that kind of blocks that or constrains that, it's really, really hard. And I know how passionate you are, all of you, about our kids and families. And so we know this hasn't been easy on you. And So thank you for your support.
And if I could add, I know that we were able to get out a pretty extensive FAQ and certainly have been able to answer some questions in the presentation tonight, but we know that there are still many, many more questions. And in our last communication, we had a link for families, parents, caregivers to submit additional questions. When I looked this evening, we had 182, people that had submitted one or many questions. And so we will have additional communication that continues to come out. So more FAQs and video supports and such. So definitely feel free to submit. Certainly our inbox is really full and we're doing our best to get through as many as we can, as quickly as we can, but we will continue to provide additional information if you still have questions we haven't answered yet.
Thank you. I guess I would, just before I turn it over to Mr. Verlingo, I would reiterate Ms. Chrysler's point out to our community and request just a little bit of grace. People are working exceptionally hard. District staff are working tirelessly to try to get through those questions. And I think you just heard Mrs. Elliott acknowledge that they are working through them as quickly as they possibly can. I know that it's also, we have a board that is comprised of board members who have made ourselves very accessible. And I think that that's wonderful. We're also engaged. All of us do have full-time jobs too. So if we're not able to respond to you as quickly as you'd like to hear a response, I guess I would just ask that you give us a little bit of grace too, but everybody is doing their best to try to navigate and respond to people as quickly as they possibly can. With that, Mr. Verlingo, I'm going to turn it over to you for the treasurer's report.
Okay, thank you. We have 4 items tonight to consider. First being the financial results for June and the fiscal year. As Ms. Mooring alluded to, and reviewing the results Tuesday evening at the Finance Committee meeting, we ended up the year with about $12.1 million in cash in our general fund, compared to prior year of 9.7. Net of encumbrances, though, we were up about $700,000. Revenues exceeded estimates by about $337,000 and $4.6 million higher than prior year. Expenditures did track lower than estimates, but we were up, in salaries and wages and benefits and purchase services and many other categories year over year. The increase in revenues was about 6.3% on an operating basis, and the increase in expenditures was up 6%. So we ended up the year positive in terms of overall expenditures being lower than revenues. The forecast, though, as we have discussed and was updated in May, does show that we will go into deficit spending for this fiscal year. That's a natural occurrence in school districts because revenues tend to grow much more slowly than expenditures, especially due to the House Bill 920 reduction factors, which limits growth in collection of property taxes. So overall, I think we had a good year, and the key will be to manage expenses and control those going forward as best we can, and also seek to increase revenues wherever possible. Not sure if you want to go into any other detail on expenditures. When I look at historical trend between receipts from state and local sources, back in 2016, we had about 73% from local source versus 27% from state. For 2019, that was up to 74.7 local, and this year 77.9, primarily due to the reduction in funding from the state, which was 1.6 million lower due to the cut they did at the end of the year. That reduction of 1.6 million will carry forward for at least, we're thinking the next 2 years. Indications from the governor and the budget office is that that reduction will be maintained and not at least get worse than what we had projected. As far as the other items on the agenda to be approved are donations. We did receive a significant donation from Ms. Sandra Howard for the Maureen Greer Memorial Scholarship of $3,000 and E. White Enterprises for the Fill My Tummy Fund to basically pay off outstanding mill balances for kids that were overdrawn at the end of the fiscal year. So that certainly helps us in terms of the potential funding deficit that we may start to incur in food service if the back to school model does not happen anytime in the near future. Certainly our revenues will be lower than they have historically have been in food service if we continue with the hybrid or the remote learning model. The third item is the Bonefish agreement. This is a 3-year agreement for the EVAS and potentially EPAS software. It's an auditing tool and monitoring tool of expenditures. It researches, provides risk factors to expenditures, looking at various items such as payments to purchase PO boxes, duplicate payments. Also compares expenditures to the state restricted database of who we are allowed to pay and who we are restricted from remitting expenditures to. It's a good tool. I've used it before in other districts and find it helps quite a bit in terms of monitoring cash flow. The fourth is an extension of the Grady Enterprises contract that we have for the health services. We effectively will extend that through December of 2021. And we have modified that somewhat to reduce the fee by about $7,000 because of enrollment changes in the district, and also to, sorry, I lost my train of thought. In any event, the agreement is necessary because we do have many compliance issues when it comes to the area of healthcare, and to have an outside organization monitoring that certainly helps, and it's standard practice in every district. So those are the things that you're being asked to approve this evening.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Verlingo? Okay. Is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 4 under letter C, financial business?
I'll move.
Mr. Campbell, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hairston, any additional discussion about those items? Oh, you know what, your mention, Mr. Verlingo, of the donation to the Fill My Tummy Fund, I think that was helped by a Gehanna graduate, is that right?
Yes. A student who I believe has been playing Major League Baseball.
He graduated in 2016, and he's already giving back like this. That's pretty
That's
commendable.
wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I first saw that online, maybe on Twitter. There was maybe a contribution that he made in a match that his I'm not sure if it was his team but whatever it was, we are very grateful for all of our donations. But it's especially, I think, fulfilling when we get to see, especially such a recent grad, be able to give back to the district in such a meaningful way. So we're grateful for that. Any other comments or questions about any of these items?
I think just to remember that number 4, it's a 18-month extension,
Yeah, thank you.
not a 1 month.
Or is it 18-month instead of the 1 year?
1 year.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, that's right. I can't write on my computer screen. I forgot to write that down at the beginning. Thank you, Ms. Mooring. Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll, please?
Okay. Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes,
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler.
Yes.
Okay, we are on letter D, and there are 11 items for action. If there's not an objection to taking those 11 items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 11 under letter D, educational pupil programs and services?
I'll make that motion.
Ms. Mooring, and is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Chrysler? Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll?
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes,
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Okay, we're on page 6. If anyone's still out there with us following along, we're on letter E, human resources, and there are 22 items for action. If there's not an objection to taking those 22 items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 22 under letter E, human resources?
I'll move.
Mr. Hairston, is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Mooring? Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll?
Mr. Campbell. Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes,
Ms. Pickle Antonio.
Yes. We are now on general business, and there are 7 items for action. If there's not an objection to taking those 7 items together, is there a motion to approve items number 1 through 7 under letter F, general business?
I'll move.
Mr. Campbell, is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Mooring, any discussion? If nobody else asks, I'm going to ask Mrs. Elliott or Mr. Barrett to talk to us about the recommendation again. I know you talked about it a little bit in the superintendent's report, but there's a resolution on here to make a modification to the calendar for the 2020-21 school year. Can you just talk through in a little bit more detail what that recommendation is about? I know, for example, I've had questions asked of me, if we're starting late, does that mean we're ending late? Like, what does this whole resolution mean?
Were you going to say something? You want me to go?
You can go.
Okay. So at this given point in time, as I shared before, we are recommending that the start of school be moved back to the 24th. It does not include any additional days at this time due to the fact that there's actually a couple reasons. We do have instructional hour requirements by the state of Ohio, and our school calendar has extra hours built in. And so adjusting still allows us to meet our requirements and still have additional days as well. But those days that students won't be in attendance, staff will still be in attendance. And so there are contractual components to that as well. Certainly, I feel like the way 2020 is going, we could probably expect a blizzard in the winter. But as I said, we do have extra days still to deal with calamity. However, if we needed to at a later time, we could look at making adjustments and shifting at the end of the year if we had to do that. In creating the calendar, we worked with the hybrid gold and hybrid blue groups. And as I said before, worked really hard to make sure both groups had the same number of instructional days over the course of the year. Just based on how days off and holidays fall, certainly, there are some Fridays, for instance, when we have Thanksgiving break, that's a Friday that Blue wouldn't have a session. So then we, pick up a Monday to cover that. But I think as you look through the calendar, you'll see, the pretty consistent 3-day, 2-day rotation. We worked hard to make sure everybody had the same instructional time.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? The only other thing I guess I would point out in this group of things that we're voting on is that there's the last component of what the board is required to do in order to put the levy on the November ballot, and that is the resolution to proceed, which I guess somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is the resolution that we need to pass in order to provide the correct notification to the Board of Election that we are going to put this ballot initiative on the ballot for November. And this reflects the ballot language or how it'll be structured on the ballot. Is that right?
Correct.
That's right.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from anyone else before Mr. Verlingo calls the roll? Okay. Can you call the roll, Mr. Verlingo?
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Okay. We are on letter G. There's one item for action. This is an item that we talked about at the last regular board meeting. And this is the conversation that we had at the last regular board meeting was that we would, I guess, form a committee of 2 board members. I volunteered myself as one of those board members because I was the one who made the request that we draft a resolution. And the other board member that ended up volunteering to work on this resolution with me was Mrs. Chrysler. So Mrs. Chrysler and I worked to write a resolution that reflected what our values are as a board and as a district. And we worked, I'm saying this because I'm going to ask that Mrs. Chrysler and I actually read the resolution, which is not something that we always do. But this was a personally drafted, personally reflective of our values in Gahanna resolution. So I do, before I take a motion, I'd like to read through the resolution. And if it's okay, Mrs. Chrysler, I guess, could I ask you, since you and I worked on it together, to read the first half, the whereas clauses, and then I'll read the second half. And then once we're through reading it, then I will ask for a motion. Oh, there you go.
Not going to be much reading then if I'm on mute. Okay. So yeah, let me just pull my screen up here. Okay. So this is to approve the following resolution, a resolution reaffirming the board's commitment to district core values, whereas race is a social construct without biological meaning, and whereas racism is a social system with multiple dimensions, individual racism is internalized or interpersonal, systemic racism is institutional or structural, and is a system of structuring opportunity and assigning value based on the social interpretation of how one looks. And whereas racism unfairly disadvantages some individuals while unfairly giving advantages to other individuals and causes persistent discrimination and disparate outcomes in education. And whereas anti-racism is a conscious decision to make frequent, consistent, equitable choices daily, it is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies and practices and attitudes so that power is shared equitably. And whereas the Gahanna Jefferson School District adopted vision, mission, and belief statements with the underlying foundational principle that the district is a place where students come first. And whereas the Gahanna Jefferson School District has a vision to build quality relationships with all students and lead in teaching, learning, and community engagement, ensuring all students succeed. And whereas the Gahanna Jefferson School District has a mission to inspire, nurture, and empower all students to love learning and believes, among other things, that significant learning happens when students form significant relationships. Learning is inclusive of the development of empathy and appreciation for diversity and strong character. Learning opportunities and resources must be equitable, relevant, and enable effective communication, critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, character development, and citizenship. And whereas the Gahanna Jefferson School District intentionally began active social justice and equity work in selecting the professional development focus for the 1920 school year, equity and access for all. Through this lens, the administrative team and approximately 150 staff members participated in a book study called We Got This, Equity, Access, and the Quest to Be Who Our Students Need Us to Be by Cornelius Minor. In the fall of 2019, a team of administrators participated in an Equity Institute to begin learning about ways to effectively facilitate awareness, conversation, and action related to inequitable systems and experiences for affected students. As a follow-up step to the Equity Institute, the GJPS Equity team looked at data to identify areas of concern so action steps could be taken to create change. The work of the GJPS Equity team is ongoing and will include the creation of a district action plan to address implicit bias, social injustice, educational inequity, and racism. And whereas it is not enough to state these values or merely affirm our previous commitments. We must actively engage in being anti-racist because of the tremendous responsibility we have in helping children grow into adults and in providing an opportunity for all students to achieve the American dream of equality and opportunity.
Now therefore be it resolved that the Gahanna Jefferson Board of Education hereby reaffirms its commitment to be an anti-racist school district committed to social justice and education. And be it further resolved that the Gahanna Jefferson Board of Education is committed to continuing to reviewing its policies and practices through an anti-racist and social justice lens. And be it further resolved that the Gahanna Jefferson Board of Education is committed to continuing to require via policy that Gahanna Jefferson City Schools commit to reviewing administrative procedures, goals, and objectives through an anti-racist and social justice lens, striving for racially equitable and diverse staff of educators and administrators, striving for an egalitarian culture that embraces differences and promotes a safe environment in which all students and educators can be their authentic selves. And be it further resolved that the Gahanna Jefferson Board of Education is committed to continuing to conduct all human resources, vendor selection, and grant management activities through a racial and educational equity lens, which includes a review of all internal policies and practices such as hiring, promotions, and leadership selection. And be it further resolved that the Gahanna Jefferson Board of Education is committed to continuing to require via policy that Gahanna Jefferson City Schools commit to reviewing curriculum through an anti-racist and social justice lens, striving to re-examine how we frame our nation's history and holistically evaluating and addressing the diversity of voices and viewpoints presented in curriculum. And Be it further resolved that the Gahanna Jefferson Board of Education commits to continuing to educate itself about race, racism, institutional racism, implicit bias, racist policies, and prioritize equity, inclusion, and diversity initiatives in our classrooms and throughout our schools, why being not racist is not enough, and will continue to work to allocate resources equitably to implement this resolution. Is there a motion to approve the resolution to reaffirm the board's commitment to district core values?
So moved.
Ms. Mooring, is there a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Chrysler? Any additional discussion, or any discussion, I should say?
Yeah, maybe if you don't mind, I guess just as part of, working through this, I think there was some challenges that I felt like we were walking into with respect to making sure that we weren't, that we were being consistent with representing what our mission, vision, and values were, right? And kind of really laying a foundation for what we believe, public education should be for everybody within the school, right? No matter what the differences are. And my concern in this was that I didn't want there to be other groups that felt that we were writing this and that we were focusing specifically on the issue of race, that there, whether it was, gender equality or, socioeconomic equality and things like that. But I think where we are in our history, I think right now in this current period of time, that's the discussion that we're having. And I think that it was important to say that that we needed to, in my opinion, as a board member, make a statement about what's going on in the world currently. And it certainly doesn't mean that any other type of discrimination or any type of work that we do to bring equity to people with, disabilities or age or anything else like that, that doesn't play a role in what our core values are, but that this is a specific response to the things that are happening in our world right now. And this is a specific response to, our commitment to reaffirm the values that these things are important to us and we have a voice in them. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Chrysler. Any comments from any other board members?
Yes, I do have some comments, and I apologize if my my internet connection is somewhat finicky tonight. So I apologize if I phase in and out. I did type out my comments so that I would stay on course, but yeah, there's a bit of reading to happen here. So I'll just go ahead and start. I respect the intentions and the good hearts of the two board members that drafted this resolution. They are professionals, and I enjoy serving with them for the years that I have. The resolution I read here is not a reaffirmation of the board's commitment to district core values, but a change in the district core values. Several primary principles laid out in the resolution make it a fatally flawed document, and it would be a mistake for the board to approve it. I hold this position for 3 reasons. First, parts of the resolution establish a vision for the district that can be easily misinterpreted as a goal or objective. And as goals or objectives, they are both unattainable and undefinable. As a board, we should avoid implying promises that we can't keep. Second, the resolution promotes a belief in systemic racism, which is a shapeless, undefeatable enemy in its underlying creed in the evils of whiteness. And third, the resolution accepts and establishes a district position of anti-racism, a concept that goes beyond non-racism and anti-discrimination, and positions itself against the principles of Western culture and critical thinking. I'll get more specific with each of these points at this point. First, throughout the resolution, the board implies vague goals and objectives and disregards the success of those vague goals and objectives is highly unlikely. One example is in the 12th paragraph of the resolution, where the board commits to strive for racially equitable and diverse staff of educators and administrators, which is incredibly noble goal considering our diverse student population. We've been prioritizing the hiring of good qualified Black teachers for years, and not only us, but districts across Ohio. All the way back to 2007, Cleveland 19 reported schools across Ohio are struggling to attract and keep diverse staff members. In 2017, the Tribune Chronicle focused on the Warren City School District, and at that location, the NAACP branch suggested they opened hiring and recruitment process to include members of the community in the hiring of new teachers, while later affirming that there are fewer Black high school graduates seeking and receiving teaching degrees. Earlier in the summer of 2017, the Columbus Dispatch wrote a story called "Ohio Students Are Far More Diverse Than Their Teachers." Our district responded to inquiries, and we reported 95% of our teachers were white and 3.5% of our teachers were Black. And of the 30 newly hired teachers for the upcoming year, 4 were considered minority candidates. The story concluded with, naturally, minority teachers tend to go to urban districts. 61.5% of Ohio's Black teachers are found in 10 school districts: Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo, Akron, East Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, Trotwood Mason, and Shaker Heights. In 2019, the Dayton Daily News reported Centerville's HR director as saying, "We invite all minority candidates who we meet at university fairs to the district for second round interviews." What are we willing to change? Giving different treatment for Black candidates and an automatic second round interview? Even if we did, we know the entire pool of teaching candidates is getting more and more shallow. The Ohio Department of Higher Education, when reporting on education degrees being earned at 4-year universities by undergraduates from 2009 to 2018, showed a consistent drop of about 14% over that time. That means in 2009, 3,705 education bachelor degrees were awarded. That number consistently dropped until it hit 3,180 in 2018. And the number of Black graduates with education degrees is dropping even quicker. I warn the board against implying these kinds of promises. We know the goal is less than attainable for the foreseeable future. Let's not imply a guarantee to satisfy the spirit of the age. Second, the resolution promotes the belief in systemic racism and its underlying creed in the evils of whiteness. I've done a lot of research on this, and I've not found one scholar that's been able to clearly define systemic racism. It's more of a "we know it when we see it" approach. This resolution invokes the use of social justice to accomplish the undefined without ever telling us what victory looks like. Writer Inaya Folarin Iman, in her article Open Season, wrote, "The aim of social justice activism is surely to make itself redundant by achieving social justice, but just when we are in a position to finally say that progress has been made, many who fear a loss of power and position have found new ways to assert themselves in perpetuity. An entire industry now exists to find solutions to real or perceived racial problems." As a board, I think we need to be aware of and correct institutional tendencies that lend themselves to violating our current discrimination policies, anti-discrimination policies, but the systemic racism created by whiteness is a monstrosity that is always redefining itself and self-perpetuating. In a battle against systemic racism, there is no concrete objective. We can only do better. But let's say we can define victory. Let's call it equity. What is equity? Well, we don't really know. In 2016, the Stanford Social Innovation Review published an article called "What the Heck Does Equity Mean?" The dictionary says fairness or justice in the way people are treated, but that wasn't sufficient for the authors. They dug further and finally wrote, "If these concepts are not absolutes, but shaped by each individual's worldviews and experiences, then the definition may be a perpetually moving target." The article concludes the definition of equity means different things to different communities in different scenarios, and it's up to those communities to define equity. One National Foundation officer said, "The fact is we don't know what equity looks like as a society because we've never actually had it." Equity, the most recognizable and universal target for social justice warring, is in fact objectively undefinable. And if we don't have equity, then we must have inequity. And how much social justice is needed to defeat shameful inequity, no one really knows. Here's the catch, though. According to critical theory, if you don't defeat inequity, you are upholding white privilege and white supremacy. Critical theory states America, by its historical whiteness, is systemically racist, and people who embrace whiteness are automatically racist. What if we dealt with unconscious and implicit bias? Surely we can make progress there. But the Chronicle of Higher Education reported a University of Wisconsin at Madison, Harvard, and University of Virginia research cooperation that examined 499 studies involving over 80,000 participants. The study used implicit association tests and other similar messages. And the result, the correlation between implicit bias and discriminatory behavior is weaker than previously thought. There's little evidence that changes in implicit bias have anything to do with changes in a person's behavior. Unconscious bias training is designed to treat racism as a disease of the mind, but discriminatory behavior all comes down to how an individual reacts to their thoughts. They can either follow through with them or disregard them. Little needs to be done about the thoughts in the first place. To sum it up, systemic racism is an undefinable, undefeatable opponent that is said to be birthed from the evils of whiteness. We won't really be able to figure out what equity is, and unconscious or implicit bias training is designed to treat a non-problem, people having wrong thoughts. Thirdly, the resolution embraces the concept anti-racism more than a handful of times, and that's severely problematic for our school district. The concept anti-racism gained traction under the propagation of professor and writer Ibram X. Kendi. I listened to his podcast with Aspen Ideas. In it, he defined racism as a collection of racist policies that lead to racial inequality that are substantiated by racist ideas. And anti-racism is the opposite, a collection of anti-racist policies that lead to racial inequity that are substantiated by anti-racist ideas. According to his words, if you are not anti-racist, you are racist. There is no non-racist, according to Kendi. There is no neutral ground. You are either an ally or an enemy. He said allies should strive to be anti-racist, not non-racist. If you're not striving to be anti-racist, you're striving to be a racist, and you're not an ally. There is no neutrality in the struggle. We're either furthering this unequal society or we're part of the struggle against it. This is intellectual bullying. He commits the logical fallacy of the excluded middle, which creates an either or when a third option legitimately exists. People can be non-racist. Intellectual bullies are wrong about this. Colorblind is a legitimate option in line with the message of the civil rights era. And what causes disparities and inequities? According to Kendi and the anti-racists, the only explanation for disparities and inequities is racism and the unwillingness to battle racist systems. All other explanations are discarded. This is an abandonment of critical thinking, which would ask what else should be the cause or could be the cause, and instead is a full embrace of critical race theory, which implicates systemic whiteness. A focus on battling racist system is a departure from individual agency. Individual agency is a core tenet of Western civilization, where the individual is responsible for their success and their consequences. Through anti-racism, Kendi leads us to embrace the collective struggle instead. How do we know if the collective struggle is working? Well, we'll need a professional diagnosis. An expert is needed to help you diagnose and fix your racist problems. And they all must be fixed to not be racist. If you score 99 on this test, you get an F. Everybody must be on board with the collective. You individually cannot do enough and you cannot give enough. Your personal actions cannot achieve the goal. Focus is a collective salvation from a group sin. Nothing an individual can atone for. When we accept the need for collective salvation and the need to rid ourselves of dissent and wrongthink, we accept basic Marxist ideology that is in direct conflict with the values of individuality and liberty. In paragraph 12, when the resolution states it promotes a safe environment in which all students and educators can be their authentic selves, that is a lie and a contradiction under anti-racism. Individuality and anti-racism cannot coexist. Bad ideas have to be snuffed out, and we will have to change those people because we're all in this together. I won't bore you by restating my points, and for a guy who values brevity, I've definitely gone on long enough. But I will say that it's hard to go against the spirit of the age. We're feeling pressure to cave to a new way to speak, a new way to think, and a change in our core values to match those pressures. Noam Chomsky said, "The point of good propaganda is to pick a phrase that no one can disagree with." If I'm the lone dissenting vote against this resolution, that's fine. It's going to be really unpleasant to be labeled as the board member who is anti-racist, who wants to be that. But I think this resolution is bad, and to be anti-racist, to view everybody by skin color and class and assume their degree of oppression, to constantly battle phantom systemic whiteness is the district going backwards, and it's too racist for me. Thank you.
I'd like to comment.
Sure.
I would say that I think that you, Beryl, and Jennifer, I think what you're trying to do is to provide hope and to possibly open eyes to possibilities of things that exist that we are not aware of ourselves based on our own experiences. Based on my experiences as a Black man, there's things that, I'm teaching my children growing up how to respond when they get pulled over by the police, when other kids are learning their, ABCs and things like that, at a young age. So I understand that if you don't experience those type of things, it's easy to say they don't exist. So I applaud you for bringing awareness to the community that our eyes are open now. We have we are making a conscious effort to do things better, to think about things and not just react to things because that's how it's always been. And we don't see, what other people see. And, just like when there was the confrontation or the thing regarding Drew Brees, the quarterback, he talked about his grandparents coming home to a hero's welcome, whereas a Black man came home to separate but equal, discrimination, things of that nature. And we're all in this together. And I think I want to applaud you how, you and Jennifer put together something to say that we are aware and we may not have all the answers at this point in time, but our eyes are open and we will address things as they present themselves to us as a board. So I applaud you, and I just want to thank you for your efforts, and I appreciate it. And I think that given the diversity of our school district, and I can't speak for all Black people, and I don't think that all white people are racist or anything like that. I that's far from the belief. My mother is mixed, so I see both sides of the spectrum, but at the same time, my mother also passed when she was growing up because of her complexion. She rode the front of the bus. So, growing up with that kind of insight to what is actually happening, it's hard to explain. And I guess if you don't live it, then you don't know it. All you know is what you've experienced. And I appreciate the effort that you and Jennifer has gone to say that we're awoke now. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
As superintendent, I appreciate the effort brought forth in this resolution. It captures many of the things we're trying to do educationally. The Equity Task Force started in 2019. We will continue to expand on it and grow it. This conversation is painful to me. Recently, I spoke to a fifth grader at Blacklick Elementary, and it was heartbreaking. She's going to be in fifth grade, and she's never seen a Black teacher. And Mrs. Groves and I reached out to her, And we had a conversation and we asked her, what are your ideas to diversify our staff? I don't think we used that word. And she had a brilliant idea. She said, we should invite teachers that are student teaching into Blacklick and other schools in Gahanna to get them to see us and to see what kind of school we have. And I think what this resolution does is it widens the lens, and it's appropriate, because I think if you are in a school and you never see anyone that looks like you, in the teaching staff, custodial staff, maybe kitchen staff, counseling staff, you begin to feel isolated and you begin to feel alone, and you wonder, what your role is in your school, in your society. And I think, the respected author, Beverly Tatum Daniel, she wrote a powerful article about how important it was for kids to see themselves in the curriculum. When we look at a photo, she said, we always look at the photo and we look to find ourselves. We look to see, is our hair messed up or are we smiling? And as Black children in our school district look to see themselves, we've made progress in that area, but it's not enough. And the reason we're reading books like We Got This, the reason we're doing training on implicit bias is to build equity and access for kids. And that doesn't mean that we want to take anything away from anybody else. We just want to build a sense of belonging for everyone. And one of the things we did recently in our last meeting, and we hadn't met as a staff, as an administrative team, in probably 8 weeks, and we came together and we wanted to address what was happening in America, all the protests and all the unrest. It was heartbreaking. And we showed a video that I encourage all of you to watch. I tweeted it out the day we watched it. It's General C.Q. Brown, who's the commander of the Air Force. And he talked about how powerful it was to be the commander of one of our branches of the military. But he said, coming up through the ranks, he never felt quite on an even footing. He never felt, so he was a pilot, but he was also Black. And he always had to kind of look over his shoulder because people would mistake him. They didn't even believe he was a pilot and they would say things to him. And I think it's a 4-minute video, and it's just a powerful statement of what it feels like to be someone who's incredibly accomplished, but never really accepted. So, Matt, I definitely respect your opinion and the research you did. But I think this is the right direction for our district. I can tell you, as superintendent, this is a direction I feel we need to go in. I'll leave it at that, but I can tell you when we watched this video and we heard from our administrators, it was an honest conversation and there were tears. And it was very moving. But we can't just stop at good conversations and tears. We need to have action. And that's what we're committed to doing. But at the same time, not taking anything away from anybody else, but building a sense of belonging for everyone. So thank you.
Ms. Maureen, did you have, I think I just saw you come off on mute.
I just wanted to say, I also respect the work that you did and in putting this together, and having worked in a man's, in a typically male occupation for my first 28 years of professional career. I'll never forget the time when I went to an appointment and the gentleman said, "I was afraid you were going to be a woman." Now I know my name's weird, right? But it was like, oh, okay, let me think about how I'm going to proceed, right? So the concept of you have to meet people where they are. I had to figure out how to meet that client where he was, right? Our teachers have to learn how to meet the students where they are. And I think their race, their level of poverty, I mean, the whole 9 yards of awareness and appreciation for where that student is to build the relationship is so important. And so the more awareness that we can provide, that's why I was very thrilled with the professional development direction you're taking. I actually got to help in one of the poverty simulations. And I can tell you the teachers at the end of that were changed. I mean, they understood why the parents had no concept of what their child's homework was or the issues. So there's so many facets of how we need to reach our children to be able to build those important relationships. And to me, this resolution supports that whole relationship building, meeting people where they are. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I maybe just a couple of things as like co-author and just to kind of put some stuff out there. First of all, I just, we as a board, I think we get along really well. And I think we have a tendency to be aligned on a lot of things. And I think what's great about this whole discussion is I think this has to be a safe place where people can, they can give their thoughts and they can give their comments and they can really give their, knowing who they're representing in their constituency base and be able to represent their constituents and the people who are talking to them. And this has to be a safe place where we can respect one another's opinions. It's so easy to love and befriend people that you agree with, right? But the harder thing in life and what we all need is not only just some grace, but to be able to love people who think differently than we do. And I just want to say thank you to Matt because, Matt, you started out in your discussion about, and you started out by thanking us for our hard work. And so I think by starting out that way, we might be in different places and we might feel differently about the language that's presented. But you started and finished with acknowledgement to your colleagues and friends that, we did put some work and thought into this and you weren't discrediting or disparaging that. And so I certainly don't want to disparage or discredit you and your thoughts and certainly the time and effort that you put into your thoughts and it shows how much passion you have for your opinion and where you are in what you believe and how you wanted to communicate that to the public. And so and that takes a heart and time and effort. And so thank you to me for trusting us and sharing a difference of opinion. I think that one of the statements that you made that kind of caught in my throat a little bit is that it's hard to be potentially the single board member on an issue like this that votes no, right? And I hope that that our intention is not to alienate or put anybody that happens to have a different opinion in a bad light, and that there are going to be times when we as a board are not going to agree on things. And while that doesn't happen very often, I hope that we continue to have discussions. I hope we continue to feel that these are safe places where we can share our views, our research, our opinions, and love and respect one another despite those differences in opinions. And so that's specifically what I wanted to say to you, Matt.
I don't have much further to say. At our last board meeting, I think that I made clear, I guess, my thoughts about this and why I thought it was so important that we write a resolution that reflects what our values are. And in my opinion, this resolution does reflect that. I guess the only other thing that I would say is that it is my, I guess, firm opinion that all of us can always do better and be better. And that is what this resolution is at its core. So I'm not going to, I guess, repeat the things that I said last month, but I stand firmly behind the words that are in this resolution. And I'm grateful to Mrs. Chrysler to working with me on drafting this so that it could not only, I guess, reflect I guess the things that we wanted to say, but also make sure that it reflected back on the core values of our district and our board. Anybody have any additional comments to make before I have Mr. Verlingo take the roll? Okay, Mr. Verlingo, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
I just want to say I respect all of you, and it's always a joy to work with you. I'm going to vote no on this one.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Thank you. We are on page 24, board reports and discussions. Up first is a legislative liaison report. I don't have much to say except that the State Board of Education met this week. They passed 2 significant resolutions. One was a resolution related to affirming local control of affirming the, I guess, the notion that locally elected school board members in local districts have control, decision-making control and local control. The second resolution that they passed was a resolution somewhat similar to the one that this board just passed. I had the title to it and now I've gotten myself off a little bit. I'm trying to find my notes. Sorry.
I can help you.
I found it. It's a resolution to condemn racism and advance equity and opportunity for Black students, Indigenous students, and students of color. And the reason I mentioned that is I thought that their resolution that they passed was pretty beautifully written. So I'm happy to, I just found the full resolution today, but I'm happy to share it with any board members who want to see what the State Board of Education passed. I don't have really much else to say. I assume that all of us tuned in at 5:30 last night to watch Governor DeWine address the state. And then again today, he had his regular 2 o'clock press conference where he took a lot of additional, well, he didn't take any questions last night, but today at 2 o'clock, he spent some time at the beginning. He had Dr. Thomas on at the beginning of the press conference, who Dr. Thomas works with the Wexner Medical Center and helped build the color-coded county rating model that Gahanna and a lot of other school districts are relying on in building their learning models. Dr. Thomas spent a lot of time explaining how that model was built and how it works. And then Governor DeWine took questions about some of the things that he said last night. That's really all that I have as legislative liaison. Next, we have an update from Mr. Campbell, Eastland Fairfield.
Yes, we had our meeting last evening regarding Eastland Fairfield. As of July 1st, they have a plan they're calling it Plan B. as far as their return plan for face-to-face and online learning. Basically, what they're going to do is they are going to split up their lab time, extend their lab time for as a larger portion of each day for when the students are actually at Eastland and Fairfield. And then for those times when the students have rotated back to at-home learning, distance learning, they will be more focused on the academic studies at that point. So it will give them a smaller student population within the buildings while also being able to invest in that lab time, which is so important for those different skills. But that was as of July 1st, and as we discussed earlier, that's always bound to change. So, and then also the search work for the new superintendent of Eastland Fairfield continues. It is in process. Just as a reminder, Bonnie Hopkins' last day as superintendent is the last day of this calendar year. And the Eastland Fairfield board is looking to have a new superintendent in place beginning January 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Barrett, do you have an update from Gahanna Parks and Rec?
Did he say no?
I don't know. Mr. Barrett, I think you're on mute.
He said no.
All right,
Oh.
there's no report. Sorry about that.
Okay, so that's okay. Ms. Mooring, do you have an update either as the local government liaison and or Gahanna Jefferson Education Foundation?
So I do have a local government liaison update, no education foundation. With regard to the local government liaison, I want to share with the board that on June 25th, Mike Berlingo, our treasurer, and Steve and I met with Mayor Jadwin, interim development director Jen, and two other members of the city staff at the invitation of Mike Snetzer from City Council. Organized the meeting. The council is desirous of having the district and the city review the revenue sharing agreement that was put into place over a decade ago. And so this was the first meeting in that process. It was a good conversation. We decided that we really need to do this based on information and data. So we put together a list of items that we would like to consider and review. And our next meeting is scheduled for the 29th of this month, at which time hopefully we can review that information and continue the dialogue. And if any board members have any concepts or questions that they have, just I'm happy to answer them. Give me a call or text what it is and we'll get it taken care of.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on mute, but I'm not. Thank you, Ms. Mooring. Let's see, where are we? Insurance Committee, anything from Insurance Committee, Mr. Hairston?
No, not at this time. I think we have a meeting scheduled for the 21st, 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Updates and stuff.
Okay, thank you. Any other items from any other board members? I do have one, but I'll ask all of you first. Does anyone else have anything?
Yeah, I do have one quick thing. So I just, any way that we can push out some of the services that the library is offering, special shout out in particular. I don't know if a lot of people are aware that the library is doing curbside pickup. You can order books online and then wait for your turn in the queue. They'll send you an email and then you can pull in to the stalls at the Gahanna Library and you call the number and then they'll bring the books out to you and put them in your trunk. Contact list. But the other thing that they offer too that is fairly new, because they've been doing the curbside pickup for a couple of months now, is the grab and go bags. And so you can tell them that you have a child that's, you know, a 10-year-old emerging fifth grader who is a boy who loves sports, and they will put together a grab bag of books and put those in your trunk as well. And there's like 5 books, and they range from, you know, just depending on what your kid might like, you can give them their library card and they'll look up some of the things that they've checked out previously if you're a frequent user of the library. And I just think that is, you know, such a wonderful thing. The grab bag itself is in a big white bag, and so you can't see through it. So it's kind of a surprise when you get to take it home and like look at what books that somebody's picked out for you. And so I think any opportunity that we have to push that out to our families, especially with the delay in school for 2 more weeks, that might be another opportunity for parents who are really trying to keep their kids off of electronics, you know, to help with some ideas on how to get it without having to purchase a book, you know, somewhere.
Jennifer, remember, was it last month that you challenged us to help replenish the board scholarship?
Yes.
Is this a good month that we should consider doing that?
Yes. So I actually, I thought that I had hit send, but it's in my draft box. You know, we get paid board members on a quarterly basis. And so I noticed that happened. I think Mr. Verlingo, in this past quarter, you were going to look at how many special meetings we've had. I think we asked for 2 things. One was the quarter and one was the year, just so that we can look and decide. So if you haven't had a chance to do that yet, and you could do that, that would be fantastic.
Any other items from anyone else?
Just to add on to what Jennifer mentioned, also, Mike, if you could share with us the easiest or best way to send the money, that would be nice, whether drop off by check or another way. Thanks.
Okay.
Anybody else? If not, I wanted, I guess, for us to discuss briefly, or maybe not briefly, I guess it depends on how the discussion goes. You know, we're talking about the idea of bringing staff who haven't been in our buildings back into buildings, and the idea of bringing students back into our buildings while we are obviously right now not sitting in our building, but we are all sitting in our homes following protocol. And I guess I just want to talk through that idea. I want to talk it through, though, both from the perspective of what kind of a message does that convey, but I also want to talk it through from the perspective of knowing the protocol that we will have to follow if we conduct a meeting, if we come together to meet in person. Are we still able to best meet the needs that I think are kind of primary in a public meeting, which are engaging with our community and being transparent? And so I guess I just kind of open that up to board members. I know it's so amazing when I think back, but it feels like it was a year ago. But we last met together in person on March 19th. That happened to be the last day that I was also in my office. And it was a really weird day. When we met in person on that day, I think that we did some things right with regard to protocol, but so much has changed since then. And I guess specifically one of the things that I'm thinking about is, you know, we weren't wearing face coverings. When we were able to distance ourselves in that meeting, but we weren't wearing face coverings, which I think would now be part of the protocol that we follow. So I just want to talk through, I guess, like I said, the idea that we need to be cognizant of the message that we're sending, not only to our families, but also to our own staff. while also keeping in mind the purpose of the public meeting, which is to conduct our business in a way that is transparent and engaging with the community. So do any of my board colleagues have any thoughts about any of that?
I actually, Burl, would share that in the upcoming month or two, I believe next month, the Eastland Fairfield Board is planning on getting together live in the cafeteria. Of course, we'll be all spread out, kind of like a press conference at the White House with face coverings and everything else. But we are planning on getting together live, especially when it comes to the candidate search process for the superintendent.
I think that's good information. I mean, so I do agree that, and I hope that anybody watching, and we could kind of play this over for people. I mean, in my opinion, I don't have a problem, and I don't with coming back for in-person meetings personally. I think that yes, if we're asking our staff to come back and we're asking the kids to come back, there should be no reason why we as board members can't come back. That being said, our in my opinion, our first priority though is to our constituents and to making sure that we have open and public meetings. And so I just have had some personal experiences with meetings where members who are voting members are in person, the public cannot attend, the meetings are being recorded, and because of the masks, you're not able to hear everything that's going on in the discussion. And I just really, with all of the things that are going on right now with the back to school plans and the levy and the things that are going to be coming up that are unknown over the next couple of months, if we had assurance that the members of the public could hear us and hear us completely, then I think it's fine. But if we don't know that, then I have a real concern with holding a meeting where people don't have the opportunity to come in person and they can't discern what we're saying and how we're conversing and making decisions.
So one opportunity we might take advantage of is Ron Smith has some new equipment that he'll be getting in, and maybe what we could do is Jill and I could practice in masks in his mics to see if it's audible, and we could figure out whether or not that would work. So I can reach out to Ron and we can experiment a little bit. Maybe he could bring the mics into our office. And so I don't know what the board thinks of that, but it might be worth trying. The other option is we could pull the mask down while we're speaking and put it back on when we're not. I don't know if that's acceptable either, but I support getting back in person. I think it's important if we can do it.
That was my only question, Steve, because we share mics sometimes. So we would need to have our own mics or cleaning between. I don't know how that would work, but
yeah, absolutely. Everybody'd have to have their own for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it's important that we really follow protocol, which means keeping face coverings on for the entire meeting and being distance and whatever the sanitization protocol is that we're using in any of our other buildings. And like, I feel this pull because I want, I completely understand the perspective of someone who thinks that is, I don't even know what the right word is, hypocrisy, I guess, that we would be sitting in our homes having our meetings while we have staff in buildings. I do think that the concern about making sure, so if we're following all of the protocol that we should be following, we want to make sure that we continue to stream our meetings live and to record the video so that people don't feel like they have to be there in the building with us. And so I agree that there are some really important things that we're talking about. And actually kind of, I mean, everything that we're talking about should be something that we can make sure that our constituents, that the public can hear clearly. I think that's a great idea. If there is a way to test the microphones ahead of time, I don't mind coming to the building. I mean, I know you guys are so buried in things. I don't mind at all coming to the building to test with Ron or whoever else. I think that's a good idea before we make a final decision. Not just to hear how it sounds in the room, but I want to hear how it sounds when it's being streamed
Right.
with the face covering on.
And I think too, you have to test different tones and voices, because I think that from my personal experience with other public meetings, low voices with low tones seem to be the ones that are very difficult to pick up through the mask and then on the recording. But higher tone voices seem to be able, the pitch, they can pick it, the microphone can pick it up easier. So that's one thing that if you're testing it to make sure. The second thing is that, you know, it would also be different, in my opinion, if the gathering order was changed so that more than 10 people could gather, because I think that that's part of it too, is that if people don't have the choice to come in, I think recording it's great and we should record it whenever we can. And if the quality of it is just okay, we're doing the best that we can. But in an environment where people don't have the opportunity to come in person and the only way that they can access our public meeting is through a recording, then that's where I think for me the rubber hits the road, because at least when people are allowed to come physically to the meeting, it's their choice, right? They can be there and we're providing that opportunity. But in this particular case, the only way they can get access is through this recording.
Yeah, and as you were talking, Jennifer, I think there's another option. And that could be, we could meet at Clark Hall and we could all be in different rooms. And that way, when we're talking, we'll be in our separate rooms. And so the audio won't impede you hearing us hearing one another. So that is also an option as well. It would be kind of strange, but we would each have our own little space, and then we could walk out without congregating. So
No less strange than anything else this year.
yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just an idea.
I mean, if people are that concerned that there's some sort of hypocrisy going on, then I would be willing to do that. But I think that the notion is somewhat, I understand people feel that way, but I just don't think that I think it's kind of, I don't think that's the board's feeling, right, or intent. And so if it makes people feel better for us to sit in different rooms in one building so that we're physically in a building, then certainly that's what we have to do. But I think that the intent is that I think we made clear why we have been meeting remotely and what that means for the public and their ability to hear us and be a part of the public process.
And what's maybe I should say is that I think at the peak tonight, 134 people were watching. So it's a way to, have the public see what we're talking about more readily. But I support going back in a building if we can do it. So we'll test out the mics and we'll report back to you, and we'll see what Ron is able to do.
Mrs. Maureen, did you have something else to say? I just noticed you were not muted.
Oh,
No, you can be unmuted. I just didn't want to miss if you had something to say. Okay. Let's go ahead and test and see what we find out. I guess the other thing, last comment that I'm going to make about it is, I know we worked so hard, and I'm so appreciative of all of the time that Jeff Collette spent with me trying to work through a plan so that we could meet in a virtual environment that as closely mimicked how we meet when we come together in person as possible. And the unexpected benefit of doing it this way is what you said, Mr. Barrett, about the number of people viewing. I looked back at our last regular board meeting and it has been viewed, I think, 480 some times. And I guess like that was the that was something that was a little bit unexpected to me. We don't often have a lot of attendance in person at our board meetings. And I know that's because people are all so busy. I guess kind of the nice thing about being in the virtual environment is that it has allowed opportunity for a lot of people that don't normally have the ability to engage with us to do that. So let's test it though, and make a decision after we do that.
Sounds good.
Anything else from anyone else?
So I had my hand up because I actually do have a Parks and Rec if you guys want to.
Oh,
I
go.
It was
Go
just
ahead.
sent to me. So trees were planted at Creekside for Arbor Day. Basketball courts are open. The golf course is doing very well. Rounds are up over the last year at this time. And the senior centers last month they were able to actually hold bingo. So senior center's
That's
been
great.
closed, so they just opened. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Oh, one more thing. I want to thank, sorry about that. I want to
That's
thank
okay.
Jeff, as you did, Burl. Jeff, you've done an outstanding job leading our district, our one-to-one. You've really set us up for a bright future with technology, all your support and dedication to be innovative, smart, and cost-effective. You've been an amazing tech leader. And I want to introduce Matt Blackwell is running the Zoom for us tonight. And so Matt was just approved tonight as our next Director of Technology. Matt's been with Jeff for a number of years, and it's been a great relationship, and he has a great relationship with the technology department. And we had a great interviewing process that our HR director, Shay Reed, set up. Had members of the tech department participate in the final interviews, and it was a very competitive process. Thanks so much, Matt, and thanks for running the meeting tonight. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you. I would say welcome, but it's not a welcome, but welcome to this new role. We're happy to have you serving in this role, and thank you for your tech assistance tonight. And I think you also assisted with our finance committee on Tuesday. So thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Awesome flag tonight too.
Yes.
I was a little late on that.
That was the best flag we've had so far.
Really? That's the one Jeff gave me. I thought it was the same one.
Oh, that one's good. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Ms. Chrysler, is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Mr.
I will
Campbell, any discussion? Mr. Verlingo, can you call the roll one last time?
Mr. Hairston,
Yes.
Ms. Mooring,
Yes.
Ms. Pickle Antonio,
Yes.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
Ms. Chrysler,
Yes.
9:54.
We are adjourned.
All right, thanks. Good night, everybody.
Everyone, good night. Thank you.
Aye.
Good night.
Night.
Night.